In a seemingly desolate world, a colossal rock crashes down, heralding the arrival of a giant stone monster. Inside a dungeon, a team of humans stands ready to confront a formidable golem. The team leader issues urgent instructions, outlining their strategy with precision. With newfound coordination, they launch their assault on the golem. But as their attacks land, the creature roars in fury, its power surging to terrifying heights. The group leader swiftly instructs everyone to activate their resistance amulets. Meanwhile, the group's mage prepares for the impending challenge. He turns to the mana caster, our protagonist, Sana Hiroto, and inquires if his mana reserves are dwindling. Sana nods, confirming that he is indeed running low. He swiftly channels his mana, transferring it to the mage, who now feels empowered to take down the golem. As the enemy approaches, the mage seizes the moment, launching a precise strike that lands squarely on the golem. With the enemy defeated, the group takes a moment to catch their breath. The leader glances at Hiroto and remarks, "You didn't contribute much today. At least lend a hand with the dismantling." One of them questions whether Hiroto is a trafficker, noting that he only seems to provide support from the shadows. Another chimes in, stating that while he lacks combat skills, he can generate infinite mana. The first guy, intrigued, admits that's quite an impressive ability, but wonders about its practical use. After all, even mages and healers possess mana absorption skills. Unless they're facing a formidable boss that requires an enormous amount of mana, it seems almost pointless. They say that's the reason Hiroto remains stuck at level 30, even after 5 years as a hunter. No matter how low that seems, the starting point for a hunter is still higher than for most. Sue, Hiroto's friend, suspects they're speaking loudly on purpose, but she knows that no matter what they say, he won't give up. However, when Hiroto arrives at the Dagon Guild headquarters, he is taken aback and asks, "What's going on here?" Suddenly, the director has a surprising request. He wants Hiroto, a seasoned hunter, to join the production department. The director explains that, unbeknownst to Hiroto, no one is willing to team up with him anymore. At level 29, hunting solo is a daunting challenge. Hiroto lacks useful skills, with the exception of his infinite mana. Sana, Hiroto's companion, reassures him that at least his mana supply is sufficient for hunting. If he pushes himself just a bit more, he might finally reach level 30. The director explains that even healers and mages possess mana absorption skills, yet these abilities often don't significantly benefit most groups. He questions the impact of reaching level 30, suggesting it may not change much. After careful consideration, he concludes that Hiroto's talents would be better utilized in the mana potion division, focusing on production. However, Hiroto challenges this notion, asking what would happen if he chose to refuse. With a heavy heart, the director apologized, explaining that they couldn't retain a member who would hit a growth barrier. Just like that, the protagonist found himself unemployed overnight. While he was known for his ability to provide infinite mana to his party members, his true talent, one he had kept under wraps, was far more extraordinary. Remarkably, he had acquired this skill even before he became a hunter. The protagonist activates his unique system, which grants him the ability to duplicate items. As he prepares to enjoy an onigiri, it suddenly multiplies into 2. This remarkable skill allows him to copy and paste any target, and after awakening as a hunter, he had high hopes for its potential. However, it soon becomes clear that this ability is more of a curse than a blessing, as it only works for him. The instant it leaves his hand, it vanishes like a mirage, rendering the idea of copying money for resale completely futile. Even more frustrating is the level restriction on copying equipment. He spots a dagger and quickly realizes that his current abilities are insufficient to replicate it. As for the so-called infinite mana generation, it turns out to be nothing more than him copying and pasting the minuscule amount of mana he has absorbed. Once applied, the mana doesn't vanish. Instead, it transfers to another hunter. He attempted to copy skills, but that always required rare materials from monsters. Hiroto believes that if he could level up just a bit more and replicate some high-level equipment, he could venture into hunts fully equipped. He also has his sights set on reaching level 30, as that would grant him access to a powerful sword known as Collision Dragons. This sword boasts 2 exclusive skill slots and a bonus defense effect, making it truly one of a kind. What sets it apart even further is its own leveling system. Once wielded, the user instantly receives a remarkable boost of 200 levels. Hiroto is eager to acquire this sword, as it can be equipped starting at level 30. With it, he could leap to an impressive level 230, making it absolutely essential for his journey. However, it will be showcased in Korea in just a week, as its durability has diminished and it can no longer function as a weapon. It seems they're merely displaying it for profit now. For Hiroto, this is a golden opportunity. With just one touch, he can replicate it infinitely. All he needs is to level up one more time. A few days later, the protagonist makes his way to a dungeon. The group confronts a swarm of giant spiders, their menacing forms looming in the shadows. Just as the tension peaks, one of the members calls out for mana. Without hesitation, the protagonist channels his energy, restoring the teammate's strength. Empowered, the member unleashes a torrent of fire skills, engulfing the spiders in flames. As he watches the chaos unfold, Haruto comes to a stark realization. Level truly is everything. This teammate operates on an entirely different plane of power. Haruto checks his system, and one of his group members questions whether leveling up this way will truly be effective. He responds that he needs to prepare something before the boss fight. Park Ha-yoon chimes in, asking what exactly he needs to get ready. With a smirk, she adds that the protagonist just needs to ensure he pays for the bus ride later and the beer. Of course. After all, Park joined these unofficial hunts for the money. Even during an unregistered hunt, Haruto managed to catch a ride on a high-level dungeon bus. The leader announced that once the dismantling was complete, they would head out, eager to finish the hunt and grab a drink. But then, he spotted a massive spider and quickly ordered the others to halt. This was Alexa, the dungeon's boss spider. Haruto couldn't help but feel a wave of intimidation wash over him. With just a single move, she could easily end his life. Park dismisses the idea of fighting, questioning why his companion is so frightened. He casually mentions that hunting a spider is straightforward, but there are a few crucial points to consider. First, there's the web once you're ensnared. Even a level 200 monster would struggle to escape. Then, there are the eggs in the nest. If they break, the giant spider will unleash its wrath. With a serious tone, he advises the protagonist to keep a close watch on both. When the giant spider's fury erupts, it's more terrifying than any other monster. Just then, one of the group members snaps, insisting that this isn't the time for a tutorial. They have no time to waste. After splitting the bus fare, there's hardly anything left in their pockets anyway. But in a careless moment, he kicks a rock into one of the webs, instantly awakening the spider. Its rage ignites, and it lunges into action, ready to attack. The others mock him for his reckless decision. The group's tank steps forward, urging everyone to back off as he takes charge of their defense. He warns them to be cautious of the eggs and webs, ensuring they manage the situation carefully. As the group assumes their battle positions, they prepare to confront the giant spider. Haruto can't help but think that they're treating this colossal creature as if it were merely a mosquito. If this goes well, he might even hit level 35 just from the giant spider. But then the tank warns everyone that the spider is shooting webs and urges caution. The mage, confident, remarks that they probably haven't faced spiders before and decides to use fire magic to drive it away. As the spider launches its webs, the mage unleashes a fireball, only for it to be thwarted by the sticky strands. The mage feels a wave of humiliation wash over him, fueling his desire to keep firing until he breaks through. However, the protagonist urges him to pause, explaining that all he needs to do is strike the fireballs repeatedly. The tank chimes in, warning that at this rate, the mage might end up hitting the eggs. But the protagonist shakes his head, a grim realization dawning on him. It's already too late. He glances over and sees the eggs beginning to crack. The tank urgently urges the others to flee, sensing that the spider is on the verge of going berserk. However, he himself is ensnared by a web. Park quickly instructs the protagonist to take cover behind a pillar, emphasizing the need to shield themselves from the incoming webs. Meanwhile, the spider's fury escalates, launching webs in every direction. The mage, filled with dread, realizes that his fireballs can't reach the webs, leaving him feeling utterly powerless. He watches as the spider draws closer, a chilling realization washing over him. His end is near. A scream of fear and desperation escapes his lips, but it's all in vain. The spider swiftly crushes him. Meanwhile, the protagonist finds himself trapped, barely able to move. As the spider advances toward him, Haruto reflects on his earlier choice to stick to low-level dungeons, wishing he had been more cautious. Just as he teeters on the brink of death for daring to ascend one level higher, a spider lunges at him. Hanjin screams in agony, blood spilling from his lips as despair washes over him. In the depths of his hopelessness, the spider's fangs pierce his flesh. Suddenly, his system prompts him with a question. Would he like to copy and paste his own essence? In a desperate bid for survival, Haruto seizes the opportunity, replicating his body and managing to escape the deadly trap. While other things may vanish when he copies and pastes them, Haruto remains unchanged. This is why, deep within a dungeon, he creates a copy of himself as a precaution. Just like in a game, if he dies, he'll be automatically restored, and the previous corpse will disappear. Yet, no matter how many times he goes through this, he can never quite get used to the sight of his own lifeless body lying elsewhere. Despite the odds, he knows he must take action to save himself. But just then, the spider strikes again, compelling him to create yet another copy. In that moment, Haruto understands that no matter how many duplicates he can produce, it won't matter if he remains trapped. Just when despair begins to creep in, he hears the voice of one of his teammates. Park Ki-young is still alive. The protagonist's heart aches with regret, knowing he can't save his friend in this moment. As he spots the spider drawing closer, he instinctively hides. The creature moves toward his companion, and a wave of guilt washes over him. Determined not to let Park meet such a grim fate, he leaps into action, launching an attack on the spider to halt its advance. But as he confronts the beast, he quickly realizes that his strength pales in comparison to its formidable power. At least he succeeded in preventing her from attacking Park. Just then, his system alerts him that he is leveled up, catching him off guard. Haruto can hardly believe that amidst all this chaos, he actually managed to level up. He wonders if it was due to his earlier attack. In a fleeting moment of distraction, he is struck from behind, triggering his ability to multiply once more. As he gathers his thoughts, he realizes that now that he is leveled up, all he needs to do is wield the Collision Dragon's longsword. He turns to the spider, declaring that even if escape is impossible, he will defeat her no matter how many times he must multiply himself. He adds with determination that even a small scratch will suffice. Now it's a race against time and against the monstrous spider. 3 days have passed, filled with relentless battles and consecutive defeats. Yet he continues to fight on. However, all his weapons lie shattered around him, leaving him with few options. Across the way, the giant spider looms larger and more formidable with each passing moment. Fortunately for him, she lacks regenerative abilities. The spider's attack abilities are formidable, particularly her web shots. As Haruto skillfully dodges the sticky strands, he can't help but reflect on how he has visited the afterlife 4 times, thanks to that very spider silk. Seizing a moment of opportunity, he deftly avoids her strikes and begins to climb up one of her legs. In that moment, he confronted her directly, aiming a lethal strike at her head. However, the spider proved to be far more resilient than he anticipated, causing his sword to shatter upon impact. It was his final weapon, and now even his copy ability could offer no assistance. The spider, seething with fury, fixates on the protagonist like a relentless adversary. But then, in a shocking turn of events, her entire body begins to convulse violently before she bursts apart. Haruto breathes a sigh of relief, realizing he has finally triumphed over the spider, even as a low-level player. His system chimes in, notifying him that he has leveled up once more and even earned a reward. But all he can think about is escaping and treating Park to a drink. However, his moment of joy is short-lived as he is suddenly ambushed. Emerging from the shadows are the spiders that had been lurking in the eggs. His time in the dungeon was just enough for them to hatch. Haruto is aware of his ability to clone himself, but his friend lacks such a gift. This realization leaves him in a dilemma. When a menacing spider lunges at him, he instinctively moves to shield his friend. However, in that critical moment, something entirely unexpected occurs. The spider lies split in half, its demise sending shockwaves through the swarm. The other spiders, sensing the loss, surge forward, driven by a thirst for revenge against the unseen threat. Suddenly, a hunter emerges from the shadows, wielding her formidable skill known as Hellfire. This is the most powerful fire magic in existence, a rare ability possessed by only a select few hunters in the world. As far as the protagonist is aware, only one person in his country possesses this unique ability. She is a formidable mage who wields blades with deadly precision, earning her the title of the Blade Witch. Ranked 5th in the nation, her name is Shinoda Nanes. She glances at the protagonist and inquires if they are the only 2 survivors. With a heavy heart, he confirms that, unfortunately, they are. Just then, Nanase notices a tiny spider emerging from the shattered egg, its delicate form wriggling into the world. As a result, high-level players fell victim to its furious rampage. Yet, against all odds, one low-level hunter managed to survive within the boss room and even saved his companion. She couldn't help but wonder what had transpired. Later, they arrived at the Hunter Association headquarters, where the protagonist was escorted to the investigation room. He expressed his gratitude to Nanase for her assistance, as well as to the supervisor who had reported the incident. Nanis reassures him, saying it's simply part of the association's responsibilities. She mentions that she has already sent the items and completed the report, so he doesn't need to worry about anything else. He's all cleared. Haruto is taken aback. He hadn't anticipated such a swift resolution. Nanis adds, somewhat matter-of-factly, that incidents like this are surprisingly common in dungeons, often leading to casualties in various ways. Regarding the dungeon buses, she explains that the association conveniently overlooks low-level hunters who pay for trips to challenging dungeons in their quest to level up. The urge to grow stronger is a fundamental instinct for hunters. While this practice is technically illegal, it serves as a form of training. After sharing this insight, Nanase asks if the protagonist has any more questions. Satisfied with the information, Haruto rises to leave. Before he departs, Nanase assures him that his reward will come soon. However, Haruto surprises her by asking that everything be given to his junior, the other survivor. This unexpected gesture catches the association representative off guard, leaving her to ponder the reason behind his decision. She can't help but feel intrigued by him, sensing there's something special about his character. Little does she realize, there's nothing particularly noble about Haruto's intentions. He declined the deposit, having already replicated everything using his ability. The item in question was the web of a defeated spider. During his time in the dungeon, the protagonist had stumbled upon this reward, but he was far from satisfied. After such a monumental effort, receiving something so small felt like a letdown. Regardless, he decided to play it safe and copied the item, even without knowing how to use it. Suddenly, the web vanished from his hand, causing a protagonist to panic, fearing he had lost his reward. Just then, his system chimed in, informing him that the web had been absorbed and was now available for his use. He is still coming to terms with the full extent of his powers. Recently, he discovered that he can not only copy enemy abilities but also wield them at his discretion. His system has unveiled even more options. Beyond simply possessing the spider's web, he can manipulate it like its original owner. This newfound skill allows him to weave intricate webs to ensnare his targets for a limited time. Haruto begins to see the upside of his situation. It opens up new possibilities. Curious, he decides to put it to the test. He ensnares an object in the web and waits for 1 minute. In that brief span, he discovers that the trap remains intact, giving him the freedom to act without worry. After a minute, the web dissolves, granting the protagonist a clearer understanding of its potential. After conducting further tests, he is now completely confident in how the ability functions. With this newfound knowledge, he realizes that his options as a hunter have expanded significantly. Determined, he sets his sights on the Collision Dragon, lawn sword, eager to replicate its power. 2 hours earlier, on the Rainbow Bridge in Tokyo, a large vehicle weaves recklessly through traffic, maintaining a breakneck speed despite the danger. Inside another vehicle, Moore Grant, a member of the International Hunter Association, converses with his partner, Erez, who, aware that Japan is the homeland of Erez's mother, he inquires about how many times she has visited this country. Erez mentions that she has visited 12 times, but insists that her mother's homeland has nothing to do with her current trip. Moore points out that the sword's final exhibition will be in Japan and asks if that's the reason her friend requested time off. Erez confirms this, adding that she is also there to search for something in a Japanese dungeon. Her friend remarks how cool it would be if she found it and wishes her good luck. Erez, however, interjects, warning him to mind his own business or he might find himself in trouble one of these days. Just then, they receive word that the blue vehicle is about to leave the bridge. With an electromagnetic barrier approaching, they'll lose communication for the next 5 minutes. Moore gazes up, marveling at the fact that the dungeon hovers above the sea. "Isn't it cool?" she muses. Erez, however, shakes her head, her expression serious. "It'll be a disaster if the dungeon collapses," she warns. Moore rolls her eyes, teasing, "You're such a buzzkill." Erez retorts, "It's thoughts like that which will get you hurt one day." Meanwhile, inside the Rainbow Bridge Dungeon Access Management Office, Shinoda Satoru grumbles about having to enter a dungeon so early in the day. His friend nudges him, smirking, "You shouldn't complain. You're only here because of your connections." He adds that joining this organization isn't as simple as it seems when, out of nowhere, a slime materializes and halts in front of them. Satoru, thrilled by the sight, remarks that slimes like that are typically found only in dungeons. However, his friend quickly counters, warning that this isn't a good sign and teasingly calls him a nudie. However, the slime isn't the only creature lurking outside the dungeon. Suddenly, the hunters are taken by surprise, their eyes widening in shock at the sight before them. It's not every day that an ogre breaks free from a dungeon and launches an attack on unsuspecting adventurers. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the protagonist reflects on his recent victory over the giant spider. His skill points have surged, and with just a little more effort, he'll reach level 50. Hunters who reach level 50 find it significantly easier to join hunting parties, as the monsters in intermediate dungeons tend to be much stronger. These dungeons offer greater opportunities for experience points and rewards, and occasionally, rare items surface, providing an even better chance to level up. The protagonist, Haruto, contemplates whether he should first create a copy of the parts from the giant Spider King. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted when he notices a throng of hunters rushing past, shouting for everyone to clear the way. Confusion washes over him as he overhears snippets of their frantic conversation about a collapsing dungeon. His surprise deepens when one of the hunters mentions that a trailer carrying a legendary longsword has become trapped in the chaos. To make matters more urgent, an official request for assistance from the International Hunter Association has been issued. In that moment, the protagonist realizes the gravity of the situation. It's all about the sword he had been pursuing. Cornered and with nowhere to escape, he watches as an aerial transport vehicle descends onto the rooftop of the association building. A member of the rescue team turns to his companions, emphasizing the mission's importance. Their top priority? To protect the transport carrying the coveted sword at all costs. The team leader asserts her authority, declaring that she will be the sole decision-maker. She emphasizes that the primary objectives for association hunters are to defeat the monsters and rescue any civilians in danger. With a firm tone, she reminds the hunters that this is an emergency and that they can discuss matters later. Just as one hunter attempts to voice his objections to Nanase, something catches her eye. In the distance, the protagonist is seen pleading to be included in their mission. Nanase brushes him off, insisting they need to leave. However, Haruto persists, claiming he witnessed everyone being dispatched for the mission. It's only when Nanase finally recognizes him that he seizes the moment. "I want to help," he urges, "even if it's just with civilian evacuations. This is an emergency, and every hand counts." His determination sways the leader, and together they board the aerial transport bound for the mission site. Nanase remarks that the protagonist prioritized helping his junior in the giant Spider King's lair, her surprise evident at his altruistic instincts. However, Haruto knows better. She has no idea about his true motives. He's only there for personal gain. Meanwhile, one of the team members expresses confusion about the dungeon's collapse, noting that they had just stabilized it not long ago. The leader remarks that everything in this world is peculiar. She points out that just because a building has been rebuilt after collapsing doesn't mean it won't fall again. This, she insists, is precisely why they are being deployed for this mission, to prevent a repeat of the catastrophic disaster that struck 15 years ago. Haruto understands her perfectly. The simultaneous outbreaks, a dungeon breach on a scale that rivals a natural disaster, it's all too familiar. When dungeon monsters aren't cleared regularly, the dungeon becomes saturated and eventually collapses. When that occurs, the monsters that escape begin to attack civilians, transforming the world into chaos. These are known as dungeon breaks. Haruto lost his parents in that tragic disaster, a truth he has kept buried deep within himself, struggling to accept it. But then, a transcendent being from another dimension appeared before him, cursing him with an extraordinary ability. This curse, while a gift, has left him in a state of uncertainty, as the being has uttered only one cryptic phrase in the past 20 years. Haruto remains haunted by its words, unsure whether they refer to the expiration of his powers or the fleeting nature of his own lifespan. Even now, the cursed sands of the hard glass continue to trickle down. Long ago, that being emerged from the depths of a great disaster. Its return could signal the onset of another catastrophe. Only 5 years remain until that fateful day. Haruto understands how to evolve his abilities. He is determined to become the strongest hunter. His goal is clear: to find a way to prevent this disaster and, perhaps, to break free from his curse. Meanwhile, on Rango Bridge, chaos erupts as monsters unleash their fury, attacking everything in sight. The hunters present find themselves overwhelmed, struggling to fend off the relentless onslaught while desperately trying to protect the innocent. Despite the odds stacked against them, they fight valiantly, covering for one another and doing everything in their power to hold the line. Shinoda Satoru and his friend are locked in battle, but his companion's inexperience shows. Satoru warns him to be more mindful of his back. In that moment, he realizes that, just like before, his friend is once again shielding him from danger. A wave of gratitude washes over Satoru. He's relieved to know he can rely on him. Curiously, he inquires about the reinforcements they called for. His friend grimaces, explaining that all communication has been severed due to the dungeon's electromagnetic interference. He's convinced the organization has noticed something unusual and has likely dispatched someone to investigate. He suggests they cross the bridge. It might lead them to reinforcements more quickly. After all, it's far better to take that route than to risk being overwhelmed by the monsters lurking nearby. Just then, near the cargo truck, a King Beerman emerges. Moore glances at the truck and asks, "Is it safe?" Ares acknowledges his concern, but reassures him that her defense magic is top tier. Even if a level 400 monster were to attack, it wouldn't breach her defenses. However, the situation on the bridge is rapidly deteriorating as a new threat emerges. Fear grips everyone as they witness the unfolding chaos. It soon dawns on Ares that even the most powerful defense magic may prove futile against this impending danger. The rescue team's aircraft draws closer when one of the crew members suddenly alerts the team leader. Nana's, despite her experience, feels a surge of fear as she spots the creature on Rainbow Bridge, Akusha. With urgency in her voice, she instructs everyone to brace for impact. Like a dragon, the Kushia unleashes a torrent of fire from its maw. The force of the attack obliterates a significant portion of the bridge, turning a dire situation into a catastrophic one. As the protagonist surveys the damage, they can't help but question whether the lungs are still intact. Just then, the aircraft draw near, and the dragon unleashes a torrent of fire toward them. One of the ships takes a direct hit, forcing the crew to scramble for safety in a frantic evacuation. Nana's realizes that they are facing the dungeon's final boss and decides it's time to revise their initial strategy. She instructs the team to concentrate their attacks on Kushia. Meanwhile, the leader scans the battlefield, noticing the protagonist is missing. Concerned, she wonders where he could be, but deep down, she knows he's not the type to fall so easily. Still, her thoughts are occupied with more pressing matters, like defeating the dragon looming before them. She unleashes her skill, hellfire, an extraordinary and formidable power that the protagonist dreams of mastering one day. Meanwhile, Haruto has just arrived at the scene, utilizing the spider abilities he previously acquired. However, unlike the others, he has no intention of engaging in battle. His sole focus is on replicating the long sword of his dreams. Across the bridge, another group draws near, and one of its members informs their captain of the dragon Kushia's appearance, questioning whether this poses a significant danger. On the contrary, the captain insists it's the perfect opportunity. He explains that Kang Ji-young and his team will be preoccupied with the dragon, allowing them to pursue the sword unimpeded. While their opponents are occupied with the monsters and the dungeon breach, they can stealthily make their way to the sword without attracting any attention. Meanwhile, the protagonist stumbles upon a trail of slain monsters and realizes it must be the handiwork of a skilled hunter. Satoru finds himself in a dire situation as the monsters close in, their strength far surpassing his own. His friend lies injured on the ground, frustratedly reminding Satoru that he was given a simple order to run and not to stay behind. But Satoru's loyalty runs deep. He refuses to abandon his friend in this moment of peril. Meanwhile, Haruto, observing the chaos, comes to a chilling realization. They're hunters. He grapples with the thought that perhaps he should distance himself from this dangerous encounter. After all, Satoru has his own troubles to contend with. His friend urges him to leave immediately, warning that the dungeon is far too perilous. The monsters just keep coming, relentless, until a new pack of wolves arrives. Understanding the gravity of his friend's words, Satoru feels the weight of the situation. Yet, he refuses to back down. Remembering how his seniors sacrificed everything to protect him, he resolves to do the same, vowing to stand his ground until the very end. The protagonist watches the entire scene unfold, a haunting reminder of his own sacrifice in the spider dungeon to save a friend. Despite facing the wolves alone, Satoru stands resolute, unshaken by the looming danger. Strangely, this moment has ignited a newfound determination within him, bolstering his resilience and fueling his desire to fight. He deftly dodges the enemy's attacks while launching his own, but he can't see in every direction, leaving him open to surprise assaults. Just as a strike is about to land, the protagonist rushes in to his aid. Haruto swiftly strikes the wolf poised to attack Satoru and asks, "Are you okay?" He replies affirmatively, but his concern lingers as several wolves lurk nearby, poised to strike. Satoru expresses his gratitude for the assistance, but insists they must flee. Even seasoned hunters have fallen to these foes. Yet for Haruto, this situation feels oddly perfect, leaving Satoru puzzled. Haruto reveals that he hasn't yet tested this ability of his. Despite the odds, he believes he can harness the ability he copied from the spider to confront the wolves, eager to discover what results it might yield. However, it isn't long before the wolves launch their assault. Panic sets in for Satoru as he realizes the overwhelming number of foes before him, so different from Haruto, who effortlessly ensnares them with spider webs. Despite the presence of numerous wolves, each one ultimately becomes ensnared in the webs, leaving not a single one free. This victory even leads the protagonist to level up, though he questions whether his slow progression is due to relying on a binding skill. While effective against swarming mobs, he yearns for greater improvement after successfully linking them together. Meanwhile, Satoru marvels at how all the wolves were defeated with a single ability, something he's never witnessed before. His friend expresses gratitude to the protagonist for his assistance and inquires if he is a hunter sent by the organization. Haruto confirms this, noting that he was on the same helicopter as them, so it's technically not a lie. Satoru's friend then asks if Haruto can accompany them back to the base. Satoru, however, refuses to abandon his friend. The senior tries every possible argument to persuade him, revealing just how far he is willing to go for his sake. It becomes painfully clear to Satoru that both of them are in grave danger. Though he regrets the situation, he resolves to offer them anything to help. The protagonist presents a healing potion, explaining that while it won't restore the user to fighting condition, it will at least allow him to move again. The senior, surprised, asks why the protagonist would give him something so valuable. Haruto replies that he needs to escape alongside his junior. Satoru, taken aback by this selflessness, expresses his heartfelt gratitude, promising that if he learns the protagonist's name, he will repay the favor in kind. The protagonist dismisses the need to share his name, suggesting instead that if Satoru wishes to repay him, he can do so immediately. He reveals he's searching for a trailer from the International Association and asks if Satoru knows its location. Satoru's admiration deepens at this request. Meanwhile, the International Hunter Association is still engaged in a fierce battle with the same bear they faced earlier. Moore inquires whether Ares plans to put the monster to sleep once more, remarking on how impressive it is for a hunter to avoid violence. Just then, he notices a projectile slicing through the air, hurtling toward him. It narrowly misses, prompting him to realize that there were indeed people targeting the sword. Amidst the chaos, he reflects that this isn't the first time he's faced off against thieves. On the other side, the enemy captain remarks on his opponent's quick reflexes, eager to test his combat skills. With that, he launches an attack. Moore swiftly defends himself, declaring that he won't be defeated so easily. He adds with determination that he is the guardian of the transported item, vowing to keep anyone from getting near the cargo. Ares desperately attempts to warn Moore of the impending danger, but it's too late. He is struck down, collapsing to his knees in confusion. Ares explains that their enemies have used a potion that blocks mana absorption, warning him that if he tries to absorb mana now, it could cost him his life. Meanwhile, the enemy captain smirks, revealing that the mage was completely unaware of the trap. He insists he isn't underestimating anyone. He's merely following their usual tactics. Ares reveals that the enemies attempted to gain an advantage by employing poisonous items, which the International Hunter Association strictly prohibits. Determined not to make things easy for them, she vows to complicate their mission at every turn. The enemies retort that using mana will only accelerate her demise, paving the way for them to seize what they desire. But then, the unexpected happens. The bear that had been attacking earlier reappears, fueled by its pent-up rage. With no mercy, it unleashes its fury on the enemies, clawing through them with brutal force, leaving a gruesome trail of blood in its wake. The enemy captain exclaims in disbelief that this can't be happening. He suddenly realizes the mage only put the bear to sleep. She didn't kill it. Panic sets in as he understands he needs to escape immediately. Meanwhile, the bear awakens, standing face to face with the two hunters. Moore grimly states that putting the bear back to sleep is practically impossible. Ares adds that, on top of that, her friend can't absorb mana. Moore then suggests that one day she will have to abandon her vow of nonviolence, and that day has come. She must kill the beast. She declares she'll take action, but not for him. With that, she charges toward the enemy, leaving her friend filled with worry. Yet the mage remains resolute. Despite knowing she can't harness any mana, she presses on, fully aware of the toll it will take on her body. She attempts to halt the bear with her magic, but as she watches the enemy prepare to deliver the final blow, she realizes the gravity of her mistake. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, a glimmer of light emerges at the end of the tunnel. Several webs ensnare the bear, and despite its furious struggles, the strength of the bindings keeps it immobilized. Just when it seems all hope is lost, the protagonist arrives on the scene, accompanying him are the other hunters, who eagerly praise Haruto for his impressive efforts. Satoru, unable to contain his admiration, begins to drool over Haruto, showering him with compliments that leave the protagonist blushing with embarrassment. The overwhelming gratitude and praise almost make Haruto second-guess his decision to save them. Nevertheless, he approaches the mage, checking to see if she's all right. He also inquires whether she's a hunter from the International Association. Ares is taken aback, unsure of how to respond. In contrast, Moore cuts in, asking Haruto if he's after the sword like the others. With a calm demeanor, Haruto lies, insisting that his only intention is to protect them. Moore expresses his distrust, citing the numerous attacks they've endured. Haruto surveys the countless bodies strewn across the ground, realizing that these fallen warriors, like him, had sought the sword but were mercilessly torn apart by the bear. The unease on the faces of the international hunters is palpable. Satoru steps forward, revealing his hunter ID. He asserts that they have risked their lives on behalf of the International Association and is displeased by the lingering suspicion directed at them. The protagonist reflects on the clever move made by the kid and realizes it's now his turn to act. He offers 2 healing potions to the hunters, considering it a small price to pay for the chance to win the replica of the long sword. The hunters accept the potions, albeit with a hint of suspicion lingering in their eyes. Meanwhile, the mage, still rattled by the encounter with the bear, notices that the creature, despite being ensnared in webs, is still very much alive. Soon after, other aircraft from the National Hunter Association arrive. Satoru feels a surge of hope, believing they might finally be safe. However, his friend quickly reminds him that the support team isn't there to protect them. They still have a fearsome dragon to confront. Nanis then commands her team to cease fire, warning that the enemy is about to enter Phase 3, which means it will begin unleashing devastating shockwaves across the area. With the support guilds now on the scene, operations must pause until every citizen is safely evacuated. Just then, a familiar figure approaches, inquiring about when they can finally close the dungeon's interval. It's Kumahayam, and he remarks that it has been quite some time since they last encountered each other. Nanis demands to know what he's doing there, her disbelief mounting as she sees what he's holding. He prepares to attack, defying everything that had been agreed upon. Realizing the danger, Nanis urgently tells him to stop. If he goes through with this, he'll endanger not just everyone around them, but himself as well. He retorts, asking if she's afraid of larvae, recalling how furious he was during the last stabilization mission at the ancient bridge dungeon when she and the association took all the credit for defeating that creature. This time, he declares that he will slay the dragon himself and claim all the treasure it guards. The team leader, sensing the impending danger, quickly orders everyone to retreat. Suddenly, the ground trembles violently as the dragon crashes onto the bridge, obliterating a significant portion of what remains. Even the protagonist finds himself in a tight spot, but thanks to his spider skills, he manages to escape. Not only that, he cleverly uses his webs to ensnare others, preventing the cargo from plummeting into the sea. However, this is just one danger among many. With the monster defeated, he realizes that he underestimated the challenges ahead. Suddenly, Cool materializes before him, expressing his astonishment that anyone is still alive. He's even more surprised to find that the protagonist is merely a low-ranked hunter, but he offers a begrudging compliment for that very fact. Haruto's gaze is drawn to an emblem on Ku's neck, recognizing it as the insignia of the Guild of the Future, the 3rd largest guild in the country. Without hesitation, he questions Ku, asking if their priority wasn't supposed to be rescuing civilians and eliminating the monsters. However, Ku appears uninterested in the situation, stating that all the civilians have already been rescued. Yet, aside from the dragon, another presence is troubling him. He soon realizes it's the bear. To his surprise, he notices the creature is ensnared in spider webs. Curiously, he wonders how the protagonist managed to do that with just a single touch. With a swift motion, Ku takes down the bear in one decisive blow. He watches as the protagonist restrains a high-level monster while holding up a trailer that must weigh tons. A thought crosses his mind. Could he really capture a monster using only webs? Meanwhile, Haruto, witnessing Ku's incredible strength, comes to a startling realization this guy could have taken down the dragon. Just then, he levels up. Ku, noticing this, quips if Haruto just wiped out a crowd of weaklings. He hadn't expected the protagonist to manage both webs and mobs at his current level. With a smirk, he adds that he might have accidentally stolen Haruto's kill and the reward that came with it. However, he dismisses the reward as nothing more than a bear's claw, tossing it aside with disdain. "I don't need this trash," he scoffs, flinging the claw toward the protagonist. Haruto bristles at his attitude, ready to respond, but before he can say anything, Nanase steps forward. She had feared the worst, believing Haruto was dead, but now relief washes over her at the sight of him. Ku, taken aback by their familiarity, raises an eyebrow and mutters, "This is getting more and more confusing." Nanase inquires about what happened, but Haruto brushes it off, insisting it's nothing. She informs him that the support team is evacuating civilians and urges him to join them. When the enemy awakens, it will launch an attack, she warns. Haruto questions why they shouldn't strike now, sensing a prime opportunity. Unfortunately, Nane shakes her head. That's not an option. When a boss monster's HP falls below 1/3, it unleashes a move called Ultimate, which can either send it into a berserk rage or unleash a devastating attack. Both attacks cover a wide range. Mid-tier or lower bosses often enter a berserk mode, where they fixate solely on the player, avoiding any phase transitions. However, a final boss like this dragon possesses a massive HP pool and employs berserk attacks, leading to a multi-phase battle. In the third phase, sensing the threat, the dragon unleashes a devastating large-scale attack. The dragon begins to absorb all the mana in its vicinity, creating a protective barrier around itself. During this time, no physical or magical attacks can penetrate its defenses. Suddenly, the dragon awakens, catching Nanase completely off guard. Meanwhile, Ku confidently declares that he'll turn the dragon into a piñata before it even has a chance to breathe fire. Nanis, though anxious, reassures herself that the protagonist will survive once more. But Ku, with a hint of grim humor, warns her that survival this time will be a challenge. He adds, "Don't blame us if you end up as dragon fodder. Low-ranked hunters dying in dungeons is more common than car accidents." Haruto realizes he didn't see this coming, but he knows he must be the one to slay the dragon. Turning to Ku, he ominously declares that when the moment is right, he'll make him taste his own poison. Upon returning to the group, Satoru expresses his gratitude, saying the protagonist has saved him once again. Haruto then turns to Ares and Mor, explaining that he faces a daunting task ahead and will need their assistance. He reveals that Kushia has entered Phase 3 and is on the verge of unleashing a devastating attack. If that happens, everything around them will be destroyed. Moreover, they might not be able to recover the trailer or the longsword. That's why Haruto insists he must kill Kusha before it's too late. But to do so, he needs the Kalisha sword from the dragon. He promises to return with it as soon as he completes the task. Mor scoffs at the idea, deeming it ridiculous. He believes that taking on a monster like that alone is sheer folly, especially since they hardly know him. Haruto anticipated that his words might fall on deaf ears, but he understood the urgency of reaching the trailer before it was too late. Here's revealed that she required a significant amount of mana to unlock the trailer, but she was unable to harness it due to being poisoned by a potion from their previous foes. Mor is taken aback that she's even contemplating helping the protagonist. What surprises her even more is when she hears him mention that he's known in dungeons as a mana transporter, thanks to his unique ability to generate infinite mana. He transfers the mana Ares needs, allowing her to tap into her powers. With newfound strength, she makes the transport truck accessible. The protagonist expresses his gratitude, promising to keep his word. Mor, skeptical, questions her decision, suggesting that Haruto might have ulterior motives. Eri assures him, explaining that it's fine because he had previously tied up the bear without harming it. His friend is skeptical, convinced that this isn't the truck they've been waiting for, the one that holds the sword he has longed for. Just as hope begins to swell, the captain of the masked enemies suddenly materializes, revealing that he has been watching the protagonist all along. With a sinister smile, he thanks the protagonist for unwittingly granting him access to the sword. In an instant, he lunges forward, striking the protagonist directly. Panic erupts in Satoru and his friend as they realize the gravity of the situation. Even the international hunters are taken aback. As the enemy approaches the sword at the back of the truck, he reflects on how he never imagined things would end this way. A sense of satisfaction washes over him for having succeeded until an unexpected turn of events unfolds. The webs securing the truck on the bridge suddenly snap, sending the vehicle plummeting straight into the sea. Underwater, the protagonist seizes the moment to grasp the sword and confront his enemy. Caught off guard by an attack from behind, Haruto retaliates with swift precision. He never anticipated that this would be the way he would acquire the sword, but he had conserved his strength for just such an opportunity. Now, with the weapon of his dreams finally in his grasp, he revels in his hard-won victory. Haruto quickly sets to work, crafting a copy of the sword. To his surprise, his system chimes in, informing him that he's too low a level to duplicate the item. Confused, he realizes he had assumed he needed to be at level 30 for this task, and now, at level 50, it should be a breeze. Just as he processes this setback, the enemy rises again, smirking as they remark, "Nice try." He declares that he nearly brought shame to the Blood Tower Guild and lunges at the protagonist once more. After the attack, he heals himself, boasting that without his regenerative abilities, he would be dead. But he's not content with merely taking the sword. He plans to wield it against the protagonist, eager to avenge the pain he endured. With a sinister grin, he proclaims that the protagonist will never see the light of day again, and on top of that, he will claim the sword of his dreams. Meanwhile, Haruto's system chimes in, signaling that the sword has successfully bonded with its wielder. As if by magic, the system begins to replicate the sword's abilities. Haruto is unsure of the exact mechanics at play, but he trusts that his system will handle everything seamlessly. Outside, the dragon continues its rampage, and Ku warns that the enemy is preparing a devastating area attack. The situation is escalating, and things are about to get even more chaotic. Kushia was poised to launch an attack when something stirred ominously beneath the surface of the sea. Before it could react, however, it was struck down, leaving even the seasoned hunters astonished by the sudden turn of events. Later, at the Japanese Association building, one of the directors convened a meeting. He solemnly announced that the collapse of the dungeon at Rainbow Bridge had resulted in numerous casualties and widespread destruction. The Hunters Association, along with several guilds, swiftly addressed the situation, resolving it in under 2 hours. However, criticism is mounting against the Dungeon Access Office for its apparent negligence. In Tokyo, a representative reassures everyone not to worry too much, promising that they will soon witness how Gushia is being managed. Takuchi-gu mentions that he heard the association successfully cleared the Rainbow Bridge dungeon about 3 months ago. Shinoda Makoto asserts that simply performing a cleanup doesn't ensure that a collapse won't occur again. This sparks a heated discussion among the guild members about whether they should take action in such situations. Meanwhile, Nanis is consumed by thoughts of whether the protagonist has succeeded. Amid the chaos, Takuchi-gu interrupts, asserting that what they truly need to know is the boss's respawn time. He points out that it shouldn't have appeared for another 5 months. With a smirk, he questions Hunter Nanis, who has been acting both arrogantly and stealthily within the association. If he had indeed failed to defeat the dragon back then, what would have been the consequences? Nanis, who had been calm and patient until now, couldn't take the provocation any longer. With a sudden burst of anger, she slammed her hands down on the table, splintering it into pieces. The room fell silent, everyone present frozen in fear. Everyone, that is, except Ku, who was all too familiar with her reputation. The others exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of how to respond. "What are you doing?" they asked, their voices trembling. Takuchi, irritated by Nanis's reaction, finds himself provoked. However, Fuwa steps in, urging him to calm down. He acknowledges that his employee was rude and offers an apology on her behalf. Takuchi, unfazed, labels her insolent, warning that if she continues to misuse her power, it will ultimately backfire on her. In response, Nanis calmly states that some people need to see to believe. She thought it would be more effective to demonstrate her point rather than simply explain it. She explains that what she just demonstrated is the reward she earned for defeating Kushia, last time an ability known as Shockwave. She mentions that her master, Shirosaki, who played a crucial role in subduing the dragon, can confirm her claim. Ku admits he hasn't had the chance to analyze the rewards yet, but he doubts she's lying. Fuwa chimes in, noting that thanks to Master Shirosaki's contributions, the damage was significantly minimized. As everyone rises to applaud, Ku remains seated, his gaze fixed on Nanis. A realization dawns on him she's deliberately withholding her support. He suspects she still harbors resentment from their earlier encounter, and he's determined to make her pay for it. Meanwhile, the thief who stole the dragon is also on his radar. He won't rest until he tracks him down. Nanis, however, asserts her resolve, stating that she will take full responsibility for the dungeon's collapse and will personally oversee the investigation. She plans to confront the guilds that delayed sending reinforcements. Having addressed everyone's concerns about her, she prepares to take her leave. But just then, Erez and others arrive, interrupting her departure. He declares that the meeting will continue, introducing himself as a representative of the International Hunters Association, and insists he has an urgent message to deliver. Following the dungeon collapse, the only collision dragon longsword in existence was stolen during its transport for exhibition in Japan. In light of this, he urgently requests assistance to recover the weapon, emphasizing that this is not a personal plea, but a formal request from his agency. Takuchi interjects, questioning whether the trailer's security wasn't their responsibility, and asserts that he heard they were the ones who opened the trailer themselves. Erez reveals that the operation was conducted in collaboration with Hunter Shinoda Satoru from the Great Sages Guild and Hunter Haruto from the Japanese Hunters Association. This revelation catches everyone off guard, even the steadfast Kumahiam. Shinoda Makoto is visibly troubled by the news of Satoru's involvement, knowing the boy hails from a respectable family. Meanwhile, Fuwa interjects, noting that there is no record of a member named Sanam Haruto in any Japanese organization. Nanas, however, not only recognizes him, but is visibly disturbed by the mention. In that moment, Ku feels a surge of hope his revenge might come sooner than he anticipated. He then inquires if Ares is referring to the man who had tied up King Bierman with the massive threads of the giant king spider. Ku had witnessed the chaos unfold and was convinced that this individual was a member of the Hunters Association. His surprise deepens as he grapples with the realization that he might have been mistaken. He then inquires about what Nanas knows regarding Haruto, having observed the closeness between the two. Meanwhile, the stolen sword is delivered to a shadowy figure, a man named Kurosaki Takami. The trafficker and leader of the dark guild known as Blood of the Tower takes hold of the weapon and examines it closely. He realizes that this sword has the power to instantly elevate its user's level by 200, and he recognizes its previous wielder by the unique pattern on the hilt. He claims it was worth spending hundreds of millions to orchestrate the dungeon escape. The masked man suddenly realizes that the guildmaster was indeed behind the dungeon's collapse. Takumi remarks that it's a shame the saying about encountering a strange man during the final operation is true. That man is definitely dead, and there's nothing to worry about. The master acknowledges this and expresses his gratitude for Takumi's efforts. He claims that as the sole survivor, he deserves the entire reward and is now free to pursue his own desires. The masked man expresses his gratitude, stating he can report the mission as a success. However, the master interjects, declaring the mission a failure. He emphasizes that this sword is one of a kind and no one would be foolish enough to part with it for a mere $1 billion. He quickly deduces that the masked man intended to profit by selling information about the sword. The masked man pleads for his life, explaining that failure in their guild is a death sentence. However, he soon realizes the grim truth. The guild master had planned to eliminate them all as soon as he obtained the sword. With a chilling laugh, the master remarks that the fewer people who know about this, the better. He concludes, this should make for a fitting souvenir to take to the underworld. Soon after, the masked man is ambushed and meets his end, ironically at the very sword he fought so fiercely to claim. Meanwhile, Hiroseki Takami, who also possesses a system, receives an alert indicating that the sword's durability has decreased by 2, leaving it with just 8 points remaining. He mutters to himself that he'll be in serious trouble if it breaks before he has a chance to repair it. In a dream, the protagonist hears a voice urging him to remember the gift he received. Suddenly, he wakes up, startled by the vividness of the dream. As he gathers his thoughts, a sharp pain in his neck catches his attention, and he realizes with a jolt that his hard glass is turned once more. Satoru unexpectedly wraps his arms around the protagonist, relieved to see him awake. "I thought you were gone," he exclaims. Hiroto rolls his eyes, urging Satoru not to be so dramatic. But Satoru can't help it. After he was struck by the enemy, a blinding flash of light erupted from the water, aimed straight at the dragon. Just then, another patient overhears their conversation and interjects, "Wait, are you the hunters who were on the bridge?" Satoru agrees, and alongside him stands Hiroto, his senior. Growing weary of the conversation, the protagonist turns and walks away, leaving the two to talk. The senior then interjects, noting that despite the protagonist's disdain for Satoru's attitude, he still came to the rescue. Satoru had insisted on saving him, even going so far as to threaten the search team from the Dain Guild, causing quite a stir until they finally found him unconscious on the beach. The protagonist ponders whether a low-ranked hunter truly had the audacity to provoke the Dain Guild and the association into action with mere threats. As he reflects, he learns that the master of the Dain Guild is Shinoda Makoto. A fleeting thought crosses his mind. Could the boy be connected to him? But he quickly shakes off the notion, chuckling to himself, convinced he's been watching too many dramas lately. The scene shifts to the president's office at the association. Nanas inquires if Hunter Sanao Harato is dead. Moore confirms it, revealing that he witnessed the event firsthand. However, he notes that, given their plans to exploit Hiroto, Nanas doesn't appear very surprised. Perhaps she has other intentions. Nanas simply replies that all hunters must confront death eventually. Moore is left at a loss for words. Fuwa acknowledges that, aside from the official documents, their involvement in the matter is indeed true. He assures Eris that the association will fully support the recovery of the longsword. In response, Eris insists that he should dispatch all his elite hunters, as she already knows the sword's location. Director Fuwa, while having suspected Eris's intentions, is taken aback by her knowledge of the sword's whereabouts. While the sword isn't bound to any user, its unique traits leave an imprint that reveals the user's level, allowing Eris to track it. Nanas, lacking this detailed insight, mistakenly believes that Eris simply handed the sword to the protagonist as a favor. Eris then reveals that, about an hour ago, she detected the sword's imprinted had been used. Last time, its durability was at 10, but now it's steadily declining. If this continues, Nana's fears it will vanish completely. The only clue to finding it lies with Eris's mother, who disappeared 15 years ago during the Great Catastrophe. Eris then asks, curious, how Nana's knows this. Nana's acknowledges that her role as a team leader in the Hunters Association holds significance. She is also aware that the long sword is a cherished memento from Eris Yu's mother. With this in mind, Eris respectfully requests the team leader's assistance once more in her quest to find her mother's keepsake. As Nana departs, she can't shake the feeling that the two of them are concealing something deeper. The circumstances surrounding Haruto's death are shrouded in suspicion. Nana knows he wasn't the type to fall so easily. Just then, Shinoda Makoto approaches her, his voice cutting through her thoughts. He asks where she's headed with such a serious expression. She brushes it off, claiming it's nothing, just reflecting on the events that transpired on the bridge. But Shinoda insists it's high time for her to return to the Diane Guild. Nana observes that as time goes on, more dungeons continue to emerge. Yet, instead of addressing this growing threat, the major guilds are busy establishing companies, treating dungeons as mere profit opportunities. Even with the current pause on dungeon activity, if it's proven that the Dayan Guild has neglected its responsibilities, they will face consequences. This is why Nana insists on standing with the association. There's still much work to be done. She refers to Shinoda as her father, emphasizing her commitment to the cause. With that, her father reveals he had another reason for coming, but quickly realizes he's said too much. He tells his daughter to visit the Hunter's Hospital before she leaves. Meanwhile, at the Hunter's Hospital, Haruto stands on the rooftop, examining his stats. While he couldn't replicate the exact essence of the Long's word, he successfully absorbed and mimicked its abilities. He had been anxious about how to wield the ability he had copied while hunting, but just in the nick of time, the Berserk ability activated. It was excruciating when the sword surged to life just before his demise, but that pain fueled him to defeat Akuzuya, a foe with a level exceeding 400. Afterward, the protagonist not only reaped the rewards for vanquishing the enemy, but also successfully copied the abilities he desired. With his copy ability evolved, he believes it can now absorb and fuse powers. When he briefly tests the vibration ability, he imagines the potential is incredible. Haruto, now a level 276, hunter a high-ranking one, at that feels confident that all he needs to do is track down the man who killed him and reclaim the Long's word. However, his thoughts are interrupted by a commotion nearby. He quickly hides, listening as Nani's warns someone that she had advised him earlier to run from danger. The protagonist is taken aback. She has never heard her speak like that before and wonders who she could possibly be addressing. Satoru interjects, pointing out that this situation could have been avoided if she had properly stabilized the dungeon. In that moment, a realization dawns on the protagonist. She suddenly recognizes that they not only share the same name, but they are also siblings, children of the guildmaster. Suddenly, the senior's earlier words begin to resonate with him. What had once seemed like mere drama and speculation now feels undeniably real. In the midst of their conversation, Satoru declares that the protagonist is alive. His sister, intrigued and anxious, asks, "Where is he now?" Haruto senses that Nanaz is searching for him, and a wave of panic washes over him. He fears that she's discovered his failure to stop the impending threat. The thought of retrieving the sword before anyone finds out sends a chill down his spine. Just as he attempts to escape, he collides with someone unexpectedly, none other than the representative of the International Hunters Association. Moore spots the protagonist and accuses him of being the thief who stole the Kalissa dragon sword. With that, the protagonist's escape attempt crumbles, but his troubles are only just beginning. Moore claims that Haruto deceived them by posing as a member of the association. Haruto protests, insisting that this is all a misunderstanding. Yet Moore retorts, pointing out that after losing the sword, the protagonist has the audacity to roam freely. He challenges him, asking if he still believes he can claim it was all just a misunderstanding. Haruto soon realizes that Moore has lost his temper, and the situation is becoming increasingly dangerous. Just as Moore draws his sword, poised to attack, Erez appears, questioning his intentions. Moore replies that he has no desire to use his abilities inside the hospital, but before he drags Haruto away, he wants to leave the mark that should have been there from the start. Haruto understands that inaction will only worsen his predicament. With determination, he taps into his unique vibration ability, shattering Moore's sword just before the blow lands. This bold move not only astonishes Moore, but also captures the attention of the two siblings who had drawn near, intrigued by the commotion. Nana suddenly realizes that the protagonist has harnessed the dragon's unique vibration, sparking her curiosity about how he acquired such an ability. As she reflects on this, she begins to wonder if Haruto's own vibe has shifted. Meanwhile, at a nearby venue, a pop concert is in full swing. On stage, a girl group captivates the audience, sending fans into a frenzy. Yet, amidst the excitement, it's clear that their leader possesses something truly special. After the show, Lee Seola strides toward her sleek sports car, a testament to her success as a beloved idol in her country. Her groupmates pile into a single vehicle, showering her with compliments about her performance before they depart. As they chat, one of the girls curiously asks if Seola comes from a wealthy family, while another notes that she's been driving luxury cars long before her rise to fame. They even express a desire to drive a car like that themselves. However, while speeding down the road, Lee suddenly finds herself cut off by another driver. Panic sets in as she struggles to steer clear of danger and avert a collision. Just managing to avoid disaster, she seizes the moment to unleash a string of curses at the offending driver. The man steps out of his car, a suitcase in hand. The girl seems to recognize him, though an air of discomfort hangs between them. Undeterred, he approaches her vehicle, inquiring if the recording went smoothly. He adds ominously that she must venture into the dungeon if she hopes to turn this situation around. Meanwhile, Nanas and her companions stumble upon a dilapidated building, questioning if this is truly where the sword was last wielded. With nothing in sight, Eris remarks that they've arrived too late. Nanus then inquires if there's any chance of locating the sword again. If not, they'll have to wait for the enemy to use it once more, hoping it reveals its location. Suddenly, the protagonist makes a connection to the Blood Tower. The enemy had believed he would perish, yet he mentioned his affiliation and spoke the name of a guild that Haruto had never encountered before. Nana suggests that if there's a guild the protagonist isn't aware of, it must be a hidden one lurking in the shadows. Haruto chimes in, insisting they can't simply wait for this guild to wield the sword again, pointing out that the sword's durability is a significant concern. However, Nanas remains confident, declaring that this clue was sufficient. After all, there's someone who understands this kind of information better than anyone else. In a flashback, we see a girl caught in the midst of a catastrophe 15 years ago. In that moment of chaos, she received a mysterious ability from an enigmatic being. Initially, she believed she had awakened as a hunter, but soon realized that what she possessed was something far more perplexing and unknown power that resembled a computer command, capable of reversing everything, much like a copy and paste function. She discovered that her ability worked not only on people, but also on inanimate objects. Soon, she began selling valuable broken or abandoned items she found. While her power wasn't strictly a healing ability, she also managed to earn money by helping others recover. However, there were clear limits to how much she could make with this gift. Desperate for funds, she needed every penny, especially since her parents lay unconscious in the hospital after an accident during the catastrophe. When she first discovered her ability, she attempted to restore her parents to their former selves before the accident. However, she soon learned that this power required a resource known as mana, which varied based on the target she wished to revert. The only reason she had succeeded in going back in time before was that she was dealing with just 1 or 2 items and minor injuries, which didn't demand much mana at all. Mana is a unique form of energy, and only hunters possess the ability to gather or distribute it. Determined to harness this power, she ventured into dungeons, risking her life for the sake of mana. In groups rich with mana, she took on the role of a support, much like a healer, yet navigating these treacherous dungeons as an ordinary person. Not an awakened one, felt akin to stepping into a lion's den unarmed. The greatest challenge, however, was enduring the disrespect and mockery from her teammates. The girl was on the verge of a much worse experience, and the thought of returning haunted her. The weight of it all was beginning to take its toll. Just as despair threatened to consume her, a voice broke through the gloom. A man approached, a curious glint in his eye, and asked if she was the infamous Mana beggar. His name was Kurosaki Takumi. In the present, Jill brought her to a restaurant and remarked on how quiet Cielo was, noting that she seemed indifferent to him. He then inquired about her extravagant spending habits, questioning how anyone could fathom that Cielo, living in such idleness, orders massive amounts of food daily. It was a shocking contrast, especially considering how obsessed idols are with dieting. Yet Jill insisted that Cielo could change her lifestyle whenever she chose. From the very first moment he laid eyes on her, he knew. Jill had a chilling perspective on death. She remarked that when people passed away, she didn't even flinch. Her only concern was stripping the expensive equipment from their bodies. She insisted that he and she shared this detachment. Silo felt a wave of discomfort wash over him at her words. But then, Jill quickly clarified, claiming it was a misunderstanding. As long as their contract remained intact, she asserted, she had no interest in what he thought of her actions. Irritated, Cielo questioned why she had to accompany Jill on this mission. She wished he would simply gather the mana, as he usually did, and hand it over to her. Jill brandished a longsword, explaining that he needed to recover a crucial item, and for that, an immense amount of mana was essential. Yet, he made it clear that he couldn't do it without her help. He added, with a hint of finality, that this would be the last time she would ever enter a dungeon. Cielo was skeptical. He had heard those promises before, only to be let down. Jill, however, remained unfazed and simply inquired if she had found it. Cielo clarified, asking if he meant the item that generates infinite mana. He added that if he were there in person, the situation would be entirely different. He was well aware of their agreement to avoid entering dungeons unless absolutely necessary. Yet he insisted that he needed her presence and participation in the strategy team. Knowing this would be their final chance, and the reward would be worth it, he assured Cielo that she would do it willingly. Meanwhile, at the future guild headquarters, Haruto sat with Nanise and inquired whether the individual claiming to be their source of information was truly their last resort. She confirmed that it was. Haruto then pointed out that when it comes to information, Midas and Daigen ranked first and second in the guild were their best options. Nanise acknowledged that the individual's expertise in dungeon strategy management was nothing short of world-class, a fact recognized by her association. Their insatiable greed for conquering dungeons was well known. In the meeting room, the leader revealed his knowledge about the giant golem's heart, a legendary item known for its ability to generate infinite mana. Nanise leaned in, intrigued, and asked if this heart was a reward for defeating the hidden boss of the Snowy Mountain Golem dungeon, where it was said to appear only on rare occasions. The leader revealed that, due to this item, his guild had mobilized their information team to gather data on the hidden heart of the giant golem dungeon. But that wasn't all. He excitedly announced that they had struck gold, the blood tower that Hunter Haruto had mentioned. His guild had been completely unaware of the tower's existence, but they had uncovered that it was secretly recruiting a strategy team for the treacherous Snowy Mountain of Golems. That's what their guild's information network uncovered. However, those individuals are far worse than anyone could have imagined. Key player assassinations, dungeon group massacres, item interceptions. There's a shadowy guild that operates in the dark, orchestrating it all. The protagonist believes the infinite mana generation item is of no use to him, yet its luxurious nature makes it a coveted prize for them. Even if they truly uncovered a hidden dungeon, Haruto finds himself grappling with a flurry of questions. What does obtaining this item have to do with the longsword? Did they steal the longsword to capture the giant golem? With a longsword that barely retains any durability, could this item possibly be more valuable? Nana interjects, revealing that the hidden heart of the giant golem's dungeon has indeed been discovered. She then asks if they're suggesting a plan to assemble a team and launch an assault on the snowy golem mountain. Haruto expresses skepticism, noting that the hidden dungeon was discovered just once, 15 years ago, and hasn't reappeared since. Curious, he asks Aras how she knows about it. She replies cryptically, explaining that while she can't divulge her sources, she has a keen interest in the dungeon and has been researching it extensively. The Snowy Golem Mountain is infamous for its wealth of resources, yet this level 1 dungeon is typically shunned by strategy teams. If it weren't for the groups, the dungeon would have been sealed off long ago. Who would have thought that with a dungeon like this, assassins would be forming strategic teams? Even if it isn't a hidden dungeon, there's surely something valuable inside. Haruto asks when they'll be departing, to which Ku replies that recruitment is already complete, and they may have already set off. As expected, the protagonist muses that they likely devised the strategy long before even picking up a long sword. Nana insists they should leave immediately. However, before they do, she turns to Ku and inquires if there's a strategy team in the guild that can be mobilized right away. Caught off guard, Ku hesitates but ultimately responds affirmatively. Nana had assumed that the future guild maintained a standby strategy team on par with the association, which is why she asked. Ku questions her statement, noting that the hidden dungeon's information isn't particularly trustworthy. There's a reason it's typically avoided. The environment is harsh and filthy, and the golems are both numerous and formidable, despite the looming danger. The protagonist and the others press on, undeterred. A fierce battle erupts between the hunters and the ice golems, setting the stage for an intense confrontation. The enemies are struck, but their regenerative abilities kick in almost instantly. Despite their massive size and weight, their attacks are alarmingly swift and devastating, making it difficult for the hunters to keep up. Observing the foe's rapid recovery, Ku urges his teammates to act quickly. "We need to destroy the core," he insists, "before they can regenerate again." After harnessing his skill to gather all the golems, he detonates them mid-air in a spectacular explosion. Turning to his men, he instructs them to unleash their own unique attacks. With a fierce determination, he urges them to follow him and hunt down as many enemies as they can. Haruto recalls that Ku had initially been reluctant to join, but now he's brimming with enthusiasm. It's truly impressive to see such a transformation. The heiress warned him that once they entered the dungeon, he would need to hunt as many golems as possible. Haruto replied that he usually only hunted as much as necessary in a dungeon. She explained that this was the requirement for the mid-boss to appear in the golem's snowy field. According to her research, this dungeon operated on an inductive principle. Haruto, confused by the terminology, felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. Ku explains that this is precisely why he described the situation as complicated. Dungeons with hidden areas tend to operate differently. In a typical dungeon, the layout is divided into zones, allowing adventurers to navigate directly to the final boss's lair. However, in an inductive dungeon, the emergence of the next zones relies on a specific formula. A plus B plus C must equal D. If even one of those conditions isn't satisfied, the others simply won't materialize. The heiress reveals her suspicion that a mistake made 15 years ago has disrupted the dungeon's progression. This could explain why the hidden dungeon has remained elusive until now. Haruto inquires if the key to summoning the mid-boss lies in defeating as many golems as possible. The heiress responds that they lack the knowledge to reset the dungeon, so they must be as meticulous as possible under the current circumstances. The protagonist unleashes everything he has against the relentless golems. Even the hunters can see he's employing spider-type abilities reminiscent of those found in low-level dungeons. Meanwhile, Eris, a skilled mage, casts her spells from a distance, providing crucial support for her teammate. In contrast, Mord dives into the fray, opting for close-quarters combat, ready to face the golems head-on. The other team members find themselves overwhelmed by their enemies, at times even retreating in fear. Just when it seems all hope is lost, Nanas arrives on the scene. With a fierce determination, she engages in battle, wielding both her melee skills and powerful magic. Channeling her abilities, she unleashes a devastating shockwave, effortlessly defeating the golem that had been terrorizing her weaker allies. Afterwards, she inquires if the men are all right, and they reply affirmatively. However, she senses something unusual about one of them. It dawns on her that it's her brother who had come despite being warned not to. Satoru explains that he couldn't just stand idly by, he wanted to support his new brother. Nanas felt a surge of irritation at the news. The protagonist seemed to have more of her brother's favor than she did. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Satoru was throwing a fit, like a petulant child, pleading with the protagonist to let him join the hunt. "I can't leave Hiroto alone. He might get lost in the dungeon," he insisted. The protagonist calmly reassured him he won't be alone. Satoru's excitement surged at the thought that he would be included as well. After much persuasion, Hiroto finally agreed to let him join. Witnessing this exchange, Nanas couldn't help but wonder what was racing through the protagonist's mind. Yet Satoru stood firm in his conviction, recalling that it wasn't his sister or master who had split the dragon in half. It was Hiroto who had done that. Nanas observes Hiroto's fighting style and realizes he's not just employing the spider skill, he's also utilizing the shockwave ability, a power only acquired after defeating the dragon Quishia. This revelation confirms her brother's claims. Meanwhile, Takumi comments on Ciola's progress, noting that they need to clear the dungeon soon. As he gazes toward the horizon, he catches sight of the ongoing battle unfolding in the distance. He also gathered a support team. He explained that his people blended in with the opponents, using stealth to steal unnoticed. However, no matter how skilled they are, they can still be caught by high-level individuals, like the future guild leader. These elite figures fear nothing, which leads them to neglect upgrading their detection skills. In contrast, he understands that his team frequently finds themselves in situations where low-level members must confront high-level foes. To survive, they maximize their skills, relying on stealth and hidden weapons, making it rare for them to be discovered. Easy and efficient work, that's the motto of his Blood Tower Guild. Takumi turns to Ciola and reminds her that it took 10 to revert the ancient Gridge dungeon last time. Ciola, intrigued, asks how much mana will take to revert the longsword. Takumi replies, "For this sword, it'll probably take twice that amount." Ciola inquires whether they need to defeat the dungeon boss to restore the sword. Takumi replies that a powerful barrier guards this hidden dungeon, and only the long sword of the collision dragon can break through it. When Ciola presses him on how he knows this, Takumi raises an eyebrow, telling her she's asking too many questions, and advises her to concentrate on her own tasks. She admits to feeling nervous, as it's been some time since she last entered a dungeon. However, she also describes their strategy as sneaky and a bit petty. Ciola urges him not to take her words too seriously. As long as the contract is in place, she doesn't mind what he does. What truly matters to her is obtaining the promised item, for with it, she can help her family return to normal. Returning to the protagonist, he finds himself battling increasingly powerful monsters. As he fights, he notices something unusual, a core nestled within each creature. This particular core stands out from the rest, and before shattering it, he decides to create a copy. To his surprise, he discovers that there are cores hidden within the ground as well. Just then, Ku approaches him, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "It's finally going to begin," he announces. With the area cleared, they can now move on to the next stage of their journey. The stage proves to be more daunting than the protagonist anticipated. A colossal, formidable golem emerges, and it clearly isn't in the mood for conversation. From a distance, it begins to hurl massive stones at the hunters, and the protagonist quickly grasps that their predicament has just escalated. Ku shouts for everyone to fall back, seizing the moment to launch a counterattack. His men watch in awe as their boss takes down the enemy with a single blow. They chuckle, relieved they were scared for nothing until surprise washes over their faces. Even Ku hadn't anticipated this. The enemy regenerates faster than the others, forcing him to strike again. But despite his efforts, he can't seem to land a hit on the core that sustains the monster. He realizes that unless the core is destroyed, the monster will continue to return, no matter how fiercely they attack. The protagonist, understanding this urgency, uses the spiderweb to seize the core before it can transform back into the stone monster. However, his efforts prove futile, as the golem reemerges regardless. Haruto watched as the web struggled to contain the core, realizing he needed a new strategy, and quickly. Just then, Nana shouted for him to get out of the way. Channeling her power, she unleashed a fiery attack on the golem. After the strike, she turned to Haruto and declared that they needed to launch a simultaneous assault on their foe. Aware of the looming threat, he contemplates an alternative approach. If they aren't cautious, they might end up having to melt down all the remaining debris. The protagonist understands the gravity of the situation. Earlier, Eris had mentioned that the most challenging obstacle they face this time is the Shift Golem mid-boss. This creature is the most daunting aspect of the inductive dungeon. Inductive dungeons unveil the next zone once specific conditions are met. Each new zone shifts based on the previous one, revealing the core of the shifting golem. Ku explains that, in essence, they must now confront the remnants of the golem they previously struggled to defeat. Typically, this would lead to either mental exhaustion or total annihilation. In a standard dungeon, this foe would be considered a final boss. There are two ways to defeat the golem, Nanas explains. They must either destroy its core or melt the stones encasing it. That's precisely what she's attempting to do. However, the enemy proves to be more formidable than anticipated. Just as she turns her back, the golem lunges at her. With quick reflexes, Nanas counters the attack just in time, narrowly avoiding disaster. The protagonist realizes that using the skill he acquired from the longsword would undoubtedly catch Eris's attention, making it nearly impossible to break the core undetected. However, he suddenly recalls the item reward ability he received, the Claw of the King Bear. A spark of hope ignites within him as he considers its potential. With determination, he channels the abilities of the Claw, just as its former wielder once did, and charges forward to attack, praying that this strategy will prove effective. Meanwhile, Nana struggles to hold back the stone golem. Moore watches in disbelief, unable to comprehend how the enemy is still standing. Eris, however, admires Nanas's prowess, noting that her Hellfire attack drains a significant amount of mana. As the golem attempts to regenerate once more, Nana strikes again, determined to thwart its recovery. However, with each use, her attack grows weaker as her mana dwindles. Just when it seems all hope is lost, Haruto arrives, swiftly wrapping the entire golem in spiderwebs. Nanas feels a surge of relief at his timely intervention, while Ku stands frozen, utterly speechless at the sight. Haruto, noticing Ku's inaction, snaps him out of his daze, urging him not to just stand there, but to join the fight against their foe. He tells Ku he has a plan to stop the core from activating, but time is running out, so they must act immediately. Ku isn't fond of taking orders, but he understands the stakes and reluctantly agrees to the plan. After all, failure is not an option. Seizing the enemy's vulnerability, he delivers a powerful blow. Once again, the golem's core is sent hurtling through the air. In a swift motion, the protagonist seizes the opportunity, ensnaring only the core and webs and halting its ability to use the stones for regenerating the golem. As he realizes his plan has succeeded, Haruto can't help but celebrate, reflecting that he should have acted sooner to separate the core from the remains. Meanwhile, Ku stands in stunned silence, utterly bewildered by the unexpected turn of events. Nini's reflects that despite Haruto's level increase, he would still require immense strength to achieve his goals. Yet, as she recalls their past encounters, especially in the Great Spider Boss Room and during the battle against Queshia, she realizes that Haruto has always been there in critical moments. Harris chimes in, noting that harnessing the King Bear's abilities is just the kind of thing a true protagonist would do. Even the other team members are taken aback. From a distance, the leader of the Shadow Guild witnesses the disruption of the core and is stunned to see the stone golem halted in its tracks. Sayola, equally astonished, asks how this is possible. Takumi calmly instructs her to cease her current actions. They need to accelerate their plan and initiate the operation. It's time for everyone to take their positions. With that, his team springs into action. Sayola glances at Takumi, her curiosity piqued. What's going on? This must be serious if you're stepping in personally. Takumi nods, his expression grave. It's all thanks to that strange guy. It looks like securing the core key is going to be more complicated than we thought. Sayola senses the weight of the situation and steels herself for the challenges ahead. From the shadows, Satoru observes the scene unfolding before him. He questions what he is truly meant to discover here. As he watches the enemy leader retreat and the girl channeling her mana, uncertainty creeps in. Should he report this? Earlier, he had received a stealth item from the protagonist and had hesitated, asking Haruto if it was really wise to part with such a valuable asset. The protagonist emphasized the importance of the item for their mission. He instructed Satoru that he need not engage in the battle against the monsters. Instead, he should focus on using the item to locate the lost dungeon and report back as quickly as possible. With that clear directive, Satoru set off to fulfill his task. While his sister and the others tackled the heavier tasks, the protagonist turned his attention to the core. He asked if he needed to destroy it. Who else would do it? S replied, affirming that since he was the one who captured it, the responsibility fell to him. Haruto felt a strange sense of gratitude. It was the first time he had been treated with such consideration. Regardless, he had already copied the core, and now it was time to fulfill his duty and destroy it. Afterward, he acquires the dungeon key. Moore expresses his surprise at seeing it in person and asks Eris how she feels now that she's one step closer to finding her mother. Eris replies that it's just the key and the real challenge lies ahead. Haruto takes a moment to check his status, pondering whether the level boost from the longsword brings him to level 285. With the prospect of soon becoming a high-level hunter above level 300, he can't help but think that his solo debut is just around the corner. Their joy is short-lived when a massive explosion erupts in the midst of the team, sending many of them flying and leaving several injured on the ground. Takumi approaches, remarking on the hefty price tag, but insists that the power it brings is extraordinary. Money makes the world go round, he muses, adding that if you let go of your conscience just a bit, everything becomes easier and more efficient. However, before he can revel in his thoughts, he's suddenly caught off guard. A protagonist emerges, attempting to ensnare him with a web skill. He notices the enemy gripping the long sword and demands its return. However, the foe dismisses the idea entirely. As Haruto comes under attack, Nanasi's worry deepens, prompting her to activate her skill, Hellbaster, to assist him. Eris shares her concern, but Moore warns her against intervening, cautioning that she could become collateral damage in the chaos. Nanasi's strike is devastating, sweeping across a wide area, but it comes at a steep cost. Blood begins to drip from her nose as the toll on her mana becomes evident. In a panic, she calls out for immediate healing. Eris steps forward, his expression serious. He warns Nanasi not to expend any more mana. The gas that hinders mana absorption may have been released along with the pillar. It's a cruel tactic designed to immobilize high-level hunters like her. Nanix questions the use of such dangerous tactics. As the enemy approaches, having restrained the protagonist, he smugly asserts that his methods are indeed effective. Ku watches in disbelief, realizing that the enemy is wielding dark abilities, techniques that are supposed to be forbidden due to their extreme danger. Confusion washes over him as he grapples with how this opponent is able to use them. At this moment, Hirosaki Takumi desires only one thing, the key that once belonged to the protagonist. Seizing it for himself, he declares the mission complete, yet he knows there's still unfinished business. He can't allow the protagonist to survive. To his surprise, Haruto responds with a chilling remark, asserting that the same could be said for him, revealing he is still very much conscious. Observing the enemy in such a vulnerable state, Haruto remarks that it's fortunate the thief who stole the longsword is just as despicable as this opponent, allowing him to fight without restraint. Harnessing his spider abilities alongside the strength of a bear, he skillfully ensnares the enemy, weaving a trap of webs interlaced with sharp claws. Some members of Takumi's team recognize this technique. It's the same method he used to capture the golem's core. Haruto admits that touching the longsword was a mistake, but just as he speaks, he's taken by surprise. His webs begin to unravel, and the enemy who had seemingly escaped suddenly materializes behind him. With a smirk, he remarks that it's the first time he's encountered a technique like that. Had there not been a shadow nearby, he would have met his end for nothing. However, he dismisses the skill as inadequate, and questions why all the high-level hunters they've defeated so far wore such regret on their faces. The protagonist inquires whether the enemy knows his name. Haruto responds that they refer to him as the mana support because he shares his mana with his allies. This is the first time he's attempted such a feat from this distance, but surprisingly, it worked. Takumi, confused by the conversation, insists that this will be his end. Just then, Ku appears, declaring that while he may not fully grasp the situation, he is brimming with mana and ready to obliterate the Blood Tower Guild right then and there. As Ku unleashed his attack, the Dark Guild's boss realized he was facing the counter to his shadow shift and escape was impossible. In a moment of desperation, he commanded Ciela to reverse it. Even from a distance, she felt the weight of his order. Drawing on the mana she had carefully stored, she focused her energy and activated her powers, restoring the dungeon and the golems to their original state. As Nanas and his companions witness the unfolding chaos, their surprise deepens when they realize the dungeon is being restored, along with all the enemies they had previously defeated. Suddenly, one of the stone golems lunges at Nanas. He quickly raises a magic shield to defend himself, noting that such a powerful spell must consume a significant amount of mana. While he contemplates the need to protect everyone with his barrier, he also grapples with the harsh reality that doing so would leave him unable to engage the enemies directly. He can't just stand there. He needs to devise a solution. Meanwhile, Nanas has already taken the offensive. Q hadn't anticipated seeing her in action so soon, but Nanasi quickly reminds him that the protagonist is a mana bank, capable of generating infinite mana for his allies. That's why she's back on her feet and ready to fight. Edge. Q is in disbelief, realizing that only mage-type hunters are typically capable of such feats. Yet here stands Haruto, who isn't even a mage-type hunter. For ultra-high-level hunters like Ku and Nanasi, activating their abilities demands an immense amount of mana. Yet, in a remarkably short time, Haruto is not only sharing his mana with them, but with everyone nearby. Ku can't help but consider the possibility of recruiting this extraordinary protagonist for his guild after witnessing such untapped potential. Setting that aside for now, he knows he must confront the giant golem without delay. Nanas insists that the collapse of the dungeon at the Rainbow Bridge was undoubtedly caused by the Blood Tower Guild. However, Moore points out an even graver concern. The dungeon has reset, and there's a possibility they could reset it once more. Ares explains that the hidden dungeon has likely remained undiscovered due to a tangle in its logic. Whether anyone was aware of this, she can't say for certain, but now the chances of the hidden dungeon manifesting are at a full 100%. Despite this revelation, Nanase senses that something isn't quite right. She notes that there are definitely fewer respawn golems than there were at the start. Ku remarks that whatever was melted cannot be restored, but they must act quickly and pursue the enemies from the Blood Tower. Nanas shares Q's concern, hoping he's right, but fears that if the enemies employ the same tactics they used at the bridge, they won't stand a chance. Meanwhile, Ku grows increasingly anxious about the protagonist's absence, dreading that the worst may have occurred. As Haruto finds himself ensnared within his webs, he seizes a moment to catch his breath. Facing the enemy has proven to be no easy feat. However, Takumi isn't about to grant him any respite. With a swift strike, he lunges at Haruto once more, but Haruto is ready, countering the attack with surprising agility. Takumi, taken aback, questions how a low-level hunter can fight with such skill. Haruto boldly declares to his foe that a low-level hunter is the one destined to thwart all his plans. With a swift motion, he unleashes his webs, ensnaring the enemy's right hand. Yet Takumi remains undeterred, brandishing his sword with a smirk. "I'll make sure you never use those webs again," he retorts, igniting flames that dance dangerously close. In a flash, he harnesses the sword's abilities to break free from the bindings. Undaunted, Haruto quickly conjures his own webs to shield himself from the fiery onslaught, realizing just how formidable the sword's power truly is. However, this realization leads him to believe that the sword's true power has finally been unleashed. He ponders how the enemy has gained such extensive knowledge about it and quickly concludes that once he captures him, all his questions will be answered. Yet, just as he forms this plan, the enemy disappears from view, leaving Haruto with no clue as to his target's whereabouts. Meanwhile, at the Japanese headquarters of the Hunter Association, Fuwa reassures Hanori, telling him not to worry since Ku is on the front lines, and he trusts that everything will be handled. However, Shinoda interjects, emphasizing that the involvement of the Blood Tower Guild is already a significant concern, compounded by their lack of intel on the enemy. Takuchi Gu adds gravely that if the enemies launch an attack, high-level hunters could be lost, leaving them with no means to gather crucial information about their adversaries. He asserts that his guild, Midas, uncovered the reason behind their audacious actions, the influence of the global multinational hunter guild, Starfield. Fuwa is taken aback by this revelation, and Shinoda shares his surprise. He questions why such a formidable global guild would concern itself with a small, obscure guild in Japan. Gu explains that this dungeon, despite its current appearance, was one of those that collapsed during the Great Disaster 15 years ago, a catastrophe that still lingers in everyone's memory. The Golem army that emerged back then was more fearsome than the demons of hell. It was Nishihara Haruka, one of the highest-ranking mages in the world from Japan, who sealed the snowy mountain dungeon of the Golems. Shinoda nods in agreement, acknowledging that without Nishihara's sacrifice at that critical moment, they would have faced certain doom. Go mentions that the heart of the giant golem, sealed deep within the dungeon, continues to attract significant interest. Both factions are prepared to go to any lengths to achieve their objectives, and it wouldn't be surprising if they decided to join forces to conquer the mountain dungeon. He then inquires whether Ares Hu is the daughter of Nishihara Haruka. Shinoda confirms this and asks who else is interested in investigating Nishihara's death. He answers no, explaining that Hunter Nishihara hasn't been officially declared dead. This revelation surprises Shinoda, who believed that all the hunters who vanished in that dungeon had been declared dead, despite their bodies never being found. Gu then reveals that a survivor returned from that dungeon 5 years ago, claiming to have seen Hunter Nishihara alive. Fuwa leans forward incredulous. Are you saying that after 15 years, Nishihara is still alive? Gu nods solemnly. While Starfield has concealed much, some truths remain. It's a fact that the dungeon continues to spark curiosity. Just then, an employee bursts into the room, urgency etched across his face. Fuwa raises an eyebrow, questioning, "What could be so important that you'd interrupt our meeting?" The employee switches on the TV, revealing breaking news. A dungeon has collapsed, and in its wake, it has devastated the city center. Chaos reigns as panic spreads through the streets. Gu's eyes widen as he realizes the attackers wreaking havoc are Ice Golem's an unsettling coincidence. A sense of urgency grips him as he contemplates the motives behind this sudden onslaught. Back with Kurosaki Takumi, he guides his team toward a new location. Siola, sensing his unusual tension, inquires if there's an issue with the plan. Takumi, however, simply tells her to focus on her own responsibilities. After a short trek, they arrive at the entrance of the snowy mountain golem's cave. Siola's excitement bubbles over as she realizes they might finally obtain the heart of the giant golem. Satoru, still cloaked in invisibility, stealthily follows the enemies. As he approaches the bridge, a realization dawns on him. This dungeon is truly vast. One of the henchmen attempts to enter but suddenly halts, sensing something amiss. He quickly alerts his master. Takumi considers the implications, reflecting that since Starfield is a global guild, their intelligence is likely as reliable as anticipated. What Takumi sees before him is the very thing sealed away 15 years ago by the legendary mage and mightiest hunter, Nishihara Haruka, the heart of the giant golem, hidden deep within the dungeon. He turns to Siola, urging her to prepare for the task ahead, reminding her to stay vigilant at all times. With determination, Takumi instructs Siola to restore the longsword to its original state. However, he soon notices an intruder lurking in the shadows, causing the girl to flinch in fear. Takumi smirks, declaring that only a fool would dare to sneak around the Blood Tower Guild's territory while trying to remain hidden. Meanwhile, Satoru begins to grasp the gravity of his situation. The Dark Guild leader, showing no hesitation, launches an immediate attack. The scene shifts to reveal a small, menacing creature lurking nearby. As it traverses the battlefield, the golem collects scattered artifacts from the ground. Suddenly, it picks up an item and scurries back to its master. The protagonist encourages the little golem, saying, "Go ahead and eat the magic stone. I'm sure you've already copied its essence." He reflects, marveling at how the golem core he replicated earlier seems to possess an astonishing array of abilities. Haruto felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. He had successfully copied the ability, but absorbing it remained out of reach. Still, he recognized the significance of this final tier item. A core could create a golem, and if he could replicate that, he could swiftly amass an army of golems. This would allow him to venture into dungeons solo, without the need for a guild. But as he pondered the golem's impressive size at level 1, a thrilling thought struck him. How colossal could it become at level 10? Though it could be risky if it grew too large, he was still willing to take the chance. Suddenly, the little golem darted away, startling him. Sensing Satoru's approach as a potential threat, it attempted to attack before he could get too close to the protagonist, but Satoru was already terrified. He dashed over and clung to the protagonist, exclaiming that he had almost died. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Haruto quickly apologizes. He admits he never anticipated Satoru would be discovered so easily, letting his guard down due to the high-level stealth skill in play. However, Satoru reassures him, stating he was at a safe distance, and suspects it was the hunters from the future guilds who were spotted. Meanwhile, Haruto can't shake the feeling that Ku appeared completely unfazed, lost in thought. It turns out he was thinking the same thing. Either way, it's clear that the enemies are part of a formidable Gang 1 that should not be underestimated. Satoru recalls a girl among them who was absorbing mana and storing it for a later reset of the dungeon. He considered intervening, but the truth is, fear held him back, and he finds himself apologizing for his hesitation. The protagonist offers a reassuring smile, praising the boy for his impressive efforts. Satoru then mentions that he feels a strange familiarity with the girl, as if they've crossed paths before. He also expresses concern about the little one trailing closely behind the protagonist. Haruto chuckles, referring to the child as his minion. Satoru, intrigued, admires the protagonist's ability to command familiars. As they approach the bridge, the boy points ahead, declaring that the dungeon lies at its far end. But unseen eyes lurk in the shadows, urging them to tread cautiously. Haruto instructs the boy to return and gather their companions. Satoru's concern grows as he realizes the protagonist intends to venture in alone. Sensing his friend's unease, Haruto offers reassurance, promising to leave his golem behind to keep watch. Reluctantly, Satoru concedes, agreeing to follow Haruto's lead. Before departing, Haruto hands the golem's core to the boy, telling him that, for now, the minion is his. He explains that it can be used to distract enemies and is formidable in battle, making it an invaluable asset. Satoru hesitantly asks if he truly deserves something so precious. Unbeknownst to him, the protagonist always has a backup for everything. With that, Satoru heads off to meet the others, promising to return as quickly as he can. The protagonist can't shake the thought of how innocent that boy is. However, he knows it's time to focus on what truly matters. With determination, he sets out to create another minion. He realizes he has the power to bring his visions to life. All it takes is mana. Channeling his energy, he crafts a bird golem, intricately linked to its creator in both spirit and purpose. Through the bird's eyes, Haruto gains a unique perspective on the world below. As he surveys the scene, he catches sight of the girl Satoru mentioned, her grip firm on a longsword. Curiosity peaks within him as he wonders what she could possibly be doing with such a weapon. Meanwhile, Seal diligently follows the guildmaster's instructions, channeling her power into the sword until she successfully restores it to its original state. However, the effort proves too much for her and she collapses from exhaustion. The task had taken a significant toll. Takumi steps forward, and as he picks up the sword, he finally holds in his hands what he has long desired. The protagonist watches in disbelief, slowly coming to the realization that everything unfolding before him is only possible because of the girl. He notices she possesses the same abilities he does, igniting a spark of curiosity within him. Haruto wonders if his skill can also replicate the abilities of others, and he feels a pressing need to discover the truth. If it turns out he can't, he knows he must make that girl his ally. Meanwhile, Takumi grips the sword tightly, contemplating that the moment has finally arrived to shatter the barrier to the hidden dungeon. He approaches the barrier, and it responds with a subtle force. Takumi reveals that the original owner of the longsword was Frederick Hugh, the husband of the hunter Hishihara. He vanished 15 years ago within this hidden dungeon. The hunter Nishihara erected a barrier that can only be breached by her husband's longsword, rendering it impenetrable to anyone else. Without the intel from Starfield, they would have been forced to battle their way through, relying solely on this unique key. This formidable barrier was established 15 years ago by a powerful mage, Frederick Q, the greatest hunter and sword saint in the world, stood alongside his wife, the renowned mage Nishihara Haruka, and their daughter Ares. Eager to embark on their next adventure, Takumi wasted no time. He approached the ancient lock with determination, inserting the sword with a firm grip. In an instant, the ground trembled, and the entire area shifted, unveiling the entrance to the secret dungeon. Takumi discovers that the rift had been concealed beneath a hologram, and after 15 long years, it has finally opened. Driven by determination, he resolves to enter and locate the heart of the giant golem. Meanwhile, the protagonist observes the unfolding events, torn between the urge to follow Takumi and the need to wait for reinforcements to arrive. Meanwhile, far away in southern Italy, within the depths of an S-rank dungeon, a fallen man declares that if he is the target, he simply asks his opponent to end his life and take everyone else with him. The opponent counters, stating that if he goes through with that plan, it would simply be murder. However, he points out that if they all perish, it would merely be classified as a dungeon accident. Just then, the hunter system chimes in, announcing that due to the death of the last user, the ability will now be transferred to another available user. With that, the hunter absorbs the skill of the foe he just defeated, a mark suddenly appearing on his neck, sending a jolt of pain through him. But as he checks his system, relief washes over him. The new features are indeed available. He then executes a powerful move, creating a massive hole in the dungeon. Just then, an elf materializes, confirming that the skill transfer was a success. Rather than deleting them one by one, the range has clearly expanded. The hunter realizes that to truly claim the cursed skill, he must eliminate the target each time. The most frustrating part? Even after acquiring the skill, it remains stagnant and doesn't evolve. She reaches out to mid-soul, reiterating what she's been saying for some time. The gifts won't transfer unless the target is defeated. The only way to acquire and evolve a skill without eliminating the target is to copy it while the target is still alive. The hunter reveals he has been searching for a method to do just that for 10 years, questioning whether such a thing truly exists. Midzol responds that while it's somewhat different, a similar skill did exist in her dimension and must be somewhere in this world, waiting for a new wielder. With that, the hunter inquires about the mission status. She replies that, according to her latest information, they've just received the report. The Blood Tower Guild has breached the Western Hunter's barrier. What they seek is crucial, and the elf urges the hunter to retrieve the heart of the giant golem before they can get their hands on it. Meanwhile, deep within the dungeon, the protagonist group has finally arrived at the entrance. Ku hurried over, only to find that the enemies were nowhere in sight. There were no signs of a struggle either. He furrowed his brow and wondered aloud if the foes had taken a wrong turn. The protagonist replied that it hadn't been long since they entered the area. With no monsters lurking about and the path ahead remaining straight, they concluded that they would catch up to the enemies soon enough. Nanus draws attention to the Starfields, questioning why the world's top-ranked multinational guild would align itself with the Blood Tower Guild. The heiress speculates that it's likely due to her mother's influence. In that moment, the protagonist connects the dots, realizing that the Blood Tower Guild had the information first. A chilling thought crosses their mind. Could this all be part of their grand scheme? Haruto realizes that the key to the raid may not be the giant golem's heart, but the heiress herself, complicating their mission further. Ku urges them to hurry, insisting they can't afford to waste any more time. If Starfield is backing the enemies, it stands to reason they would employ shadow movement abilities. With this revelation, Haruto is determined to capture one of the foes for interrogation. Satoru stands alongside them, accompanied by his little golem. Ku raises an eyebrow, curious about how he came to have such a companion. Satoru explains that it was a gift from his friend Haruto. This revelation surprises Ku. Despite its small size, the protagonist has managed to command a snow golem. Nanus then chimes in, asking how Satoru came by such a valuable gift. With a casual smile, her brother replies, "It's because the protagonist is a friend of mine." Suddenly, Satoru finds himself ensnared in a trap, having stepped on the wrong spot. But he isn't alone. Ku and the little golem are nearby. In an instant, they vanish into a swirling magic circle, leaving Satoru filled with worry. Meanwhile, Haruto and the others are also caught in the chaos, as the portal teleports them to an unknown location. At first glance, Satoru and Ku are nowhere to be seen. Haruto regrets not staying closer to the boy, but his troubles are just beginning. As a T-Rex suddenly looms before him, Haruto can hardly fathom where this monstrous creature came from. Just as he braces for an attack, Nanus appears, ready to lend a hand. With a single swift strike, she decapitates the dinosaur. The protagonist, bewildered, wonders aloud how a dinosaur could possibly exist in a snowy dungeon. Juarez explains that they are no longer in the previous dungeon. They've apparently been transported to another dimension. It seems they've entered a dimensional dungeon. Nanish chimes in, noting that it's been 15 years since dungeons like this last emerged. Juarez reveals that she knows this because her mother was the one who sealed them. However, for some unknown reason, the seal has been broken. Now, multi-dimensional dungeons are linked by magic circles that transport people to various realms. Once activated, these circles open portals to other worlds, allowing not just humans but also creatures to cross over. Juarez reveals that her mother had suspected a multi-dimensional dungeon might have spiraled out of control, leading to the great disaster. Nanis explains that this is precisely why the hunter Nishihara established a barrier in this area. They need to clear it quickly. Just then, a wave of shock washes over them as several creatures materialize, ready to confront them. Moore speaks up, acknowledging that this task will be anything but easy. Meanwhile, in the bustling city center, chaos reigns as monsters wreak havoc, demolishing buildings and attacking innocent bystanders. The guild has dispatched hunters to combat the threat, but the situation is dire. The team leader quickly realizes that they must destroy the golem's cores to prevent them from regenerating. Yet, despite their best efforts, they find themselves struggling to overcome the relentless onslaught of enemies. The golems, brimming with mana, are proving to be a formidable challenge for the hunter teams. In a moment of carelessness, one golem nearly takes down a hunter. Just in time, another hunter rushes in, delivering a single precise slash that cleaves the golem in two. A team member, eager to express gratitude, opens their mouth to thank the newcomer, but realizes they don't even know his name. He realizes the man is a foreigner. The man explains that he was only in town on a business trip, but upon witnessing the chaos, he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. The hunter expresses gratitude for his assistance, complimenting the foreigner on his impressive command of their language. Curiously, the foreigner asks about something he overheard earlier. What is a monosaurus? One of the hunters steps in to clarify, explaining that it's a person who may not excel in combat, but plays a crucial support role by generating infinite mana for their teams. The foreigner is taken aback by the revelation, but the hunter shrugs it off, admitting he hasn't seen that man in ages and has no idea where he might be. It was merely a fleeting memory. This piques the foreigner's curiosity. He realizes he's never encountered such an ability before. Just as his intrigue deepens, he finds himself momentarily stunned. From the rooftop of a towering building, Takuchi-gu, the guildmaster of Midas, stands alongside Shinoda Makoto, the guildmaster of the Great Sages. Gu's eyes gleam with intrigue as he surveys the scene below. Makoto's gaze shifts to the golems rampaging through the city, and he quickly deduces that they must have emerged from the Snow Mountain dungeon. This is a perfect opportunity for you to take action, he remarks, his tone laced with anticipation. Gu raises an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. What's wrong with the dungeons? He inquires, eager to understand the unfolding situation. He also mentions that the reward for this mission will be drawn from the association's equipment vault. Steeling himself for battle, he activates his stone armor. With this formidable protection, he can stand toe-to-toe with the enemies, prepared to confront the golems. Yet, he reminds himself that despite being encased in stone, he is not a golem. As Go engages in close combat on the ground, Makoto unleashes devastating long-range magic, his beams obliterating everything in their path. Gu observes this spectacle, thinking to himself that the old man must be enjoying himself. But just as he revels in the moment, an even larger golem materializes right before him, shifting the tide of battle. Gu stands resolute against his enemy, unwavering in the face of battle, confident in his raw strength. He fortifies his armor even further. With a fierce determination, both combatants unleash their punches, colliding with tremendous force. Yet, it is the golem that bears the brunt of the impact, emerging from the clash in ruins. With its defeat, the core of the creature is laid bare. Gu seizes it, declaring he won't let the old man claim this victory. With a fierce grip, he crushes the core in his hand. The final boss of the dungeon falls, and a sense of calm washes over the chaotic scene. The guild members erupt in celebration, reveling in their hard-earned triumph. Meanwhile, a foreigner observes the festivities from a distance, silently taking in the moment. He realizes that Takuchi-gu is Japan's top hunter, renowned for leading his own guild and quelling chaos in a mere 10 minutes. However, he lacks the ability to replicate others' skills. Unexpectedly, the foreigner claims to have acquired valuable information. This prompts him to wonder if the girl he's searching for is still trapped in the dungeon, and he begins to imagine what she might be doing at that very moment. Ciola was struck, but just 20 minutes earlier, her team found themselves surrounded by a horde of zombies. Takumi, with a grim expression, admitted he had no information about what lay ahead, leaving their fate to chance. However, now armed with the sword of ultimate power, he felt a surge of confidence, believing that their chances of survival had just improved significantly. With a swift and powerful strike, he decimates the horde of enemies, leaving nothing but silence in his wake. The path ahead is now clear, and they can finally advance. One team member exclaims that they've reached the entrance to the final boss's lair. The leader nods, revealing that they possess the key to enter. He soon inserts the key into the lock and opens the door to the boss room. What they discover inside is nothing short of astonishing. Towering statues loom throughout the space, casting long shadows. One of the statues remarks that they might have arrived too early, questioning whether the boss will make an appearance. However, Ciola is perplexed by their nonchalance. From the moment she stepped into the room, an overwhelming pressure enveloped her, leaving her on edge. She wonders if she's the only one experiencing this unease, considering that the others, being seasoned hunters, might be accustomed to it. Just then, a team member suggests they seize the opportunity presented by the absence of enemies to collect whatever they can. But before he can act, one of the statues springs to life, striking him down in a single, devastating blow. These statues are the guardians of this forsaken place. Seeing this, the others panic as the awakened beings prepare to attack. Ciola, horrified by the gruesome state of the bodies, struggles to process the scene before her. Takumi glances at her, puzzled by her shock. After all, she used to witness such horrors regularly. He urges her to snap out of it and quickly bring the injured man back while there's still a chance to save him. Ciola steadies herself and rushes to the injured man. She reaches for one of the mana storage boxes to heal him, only to discover that it's empty. A wave of concern washes over her as she considers the possibility of a mana leak. After all, even a high-ranking mage wouldn't be able to break the seal on those mana transfer machines. She notices that all the mana is flowing in the same direction, and a troubling question lingers in her mind. Where is it all going? Meanwhile, the statues clash with all their might. Takumi urges his team to stay calm and keep fighting. Seizing the moment, he draws his sword and instructs the others to deploy the mines designed for high-level monsters. One of his teammates interjects, expressing frustration that he's been trying that from the beginning, but neither the stealth skill nor the mines seem to be working. In a moment of careless distraction, he is suddenly struck by one of the statues. Even Takumi, accustomed to such chaos, is momentarily shaken. The statues crush his men as if they were mere paper, leaving him at a loss for what to do. With everyone on his team now fallen, panic sets in, and he fears he is on the brink of defeat. Now, Takumi stands alone before the towering rock creatures, relying on the power of his sword to turn the tide. However, his system warns him that he lacks the mana to unleash its power again in time to save the others. With danger closing in, Takumi finds himself at the mercy of the looming threat. Just as he inches closer to the statues, an attack comes out of nowhere, forcing him to react swiftly. On the other side, Ciola cautiously distanced herself from the danger. She followed the mana trail until she arrived at the source that had consumed everything around it. Uncertain of what it was, Ciola took a calculated risk to interact with this mysterious power source, only to discover it was the heart of the giant golem. Despite her revelation, she remained puzzled as to why it had absorbed all the surrounding mana. Instinctively, she sensed that this could pose a significant threat. The box containing the heart was not fond of being touched. It activated its defense mechanism, compelling the girl to flee. However, she wasn't quick enough. The box's defenses struck her hard on the side of her abdomen, sending a jolt of pain coursing through her. One of the nearby statues looms closer, seizing the opportunity to strike at the girl already sprawled on the ground. Just as the attack is about to land, Takumi emerges from the shadows, intervening at the last moment. However, he takes the blow in her stead. Quickly, he reaches for a healing potion to mend his wounds. Instead of using the power on himself, he directs it towards Ciola. With her in his arms, he sprints away. But suddenly, his system chimes in. The golem's heart has awakened, signaling the start of the final boss battle. Takumi races toward the door, only to find it closing fast. In a moment of desperation, he decides to harness the shadows once more to make his escape. But just as hope flickers, his system warns him again he's out of mana. In a frantic bid for freedom, Takumi sprints toward the door, pouring every ounce of strength into his escape. But as he nears the exit, a chilling realization hits him. He won't make it in time, and Ciola won't escape either. In that moment of clarity, he makes a heart-wrenching decision. With his remaining strength, he pushes her out just before the door slams shut, sealing his fate. Sela is baffled by Takumi's actions. It's so unlike him. Takumi calmly reassures her, stating that as long as she is alive, she has the power to restore everything to how it once was. With that, he resolves to stay behind in a dungeon teeming with perilous foes. Sela, incredulous, calls him crazy. "I'm not a hunter," she protests, "and I can't absorb mana, so there's no way I can restore anything." Sela, on the brink of losing consciousness, regrets coming here. The thought of her parents struggling without her support weighs heavily on her mind. Just then, she begins to sense something unusual, a warm flow of mana coursing through her body. With great effort, she slowly opens her eyes and gazes at the figure before her. As recognition dawns, she whispers, "You're the saint who once provided mana to the hunter Nanes." Sela struggles to think clearly, her entire body aching as she continues to receive small bursts of mana. Haruto's voice cuts through her haze, suggesting that if she had enough mana, she could heal herself. This revelation takes Sela by surprise. How does this stranger know about her abilities? Meanwhile, Ku's frustration mounts as they arrive at their destination, only to find the door firmly closed. Harris explains that the door will remain shut as long as the battle rages on inside. They can only open it if they possess the key, which they currently do not have. Ku then chimes in, expressing regret that they should have come here after defeating the revived golem. Turning to the girl, he asks, "Who are you?" Oritz explains that she is a healing support from the Blood Tower Guild, and reveals that she was nearly killed, but was saved by Haruto. Ku suggests they need to investigate her further, but for the moment he insists on keeping her contained and under watch. He warns that they could become trapped in the dungeon if they don't clear it, a concern that Orez readily acknowledges. Ku concludes that this is precisely why so many people have vanished within these dark depths. As the protagonist processes this information, he contemplates his next move. He has a copy of the key that opens the door, but revealing his secret fills him with hesitation. Haruto even considers fabricating a story about finding the key lost somewhere. However, just as he teeters on the edge of deception, Orez approaches the door, sensing an inexplicable connection, and reaches out to touch the lock. With that, the door responds magically, swinging open to allow her passage. Nanase steps forward, curious, and asks how she managed that. Orez explains that her mother sealed the door, suggesting a deeper connection. Haruto observes this interaction, realizing he was right. Orez is indeed the true key to the dungeon. With her by his side, he envisions a future where exploring dimensional dungeons becomes far more accessible. Standing before the door, Satoru questions the heavy aura surrounding them. Nanase urges everyone to brace themselves, revealing that something inside is absorbing the mana from everyone present. Haruto chimes in, asking if this is related to what Sheila mentioned earlier. With a nod, she confirms that it is indeed connected. Now aware that the giant golem's heart absorbs surrounding mana to regenerate, he begins to wonder what might happen once it's fully charged. Sela urgently warns the protagonist to flee immediately. No matter how strong he is, without mana, he stands no chance against the enemies and side foes that Satoru has already had the misfortune of encountering. His sister, filled with concern, turns to the protagonist for assistance. Haruto prepares to step in as mana support, determined to showcase his full capabilities. With a confident nod, he channels his energy, supplying mana not just to Nanes, but to everyone gathered around them. Sela stands in awe as she gazes at the dungeon, overflowing with mana. Though it's being absorbed at a rapid pace, it appears there's more than enough to last. A realization dawns on her. The protagonist is the source of this incredible energy. Hope ignites within her as she contemplates the possibility that he might hold the key to providing her parents with the mana they desperately need to heal. Meanwhile, Nanase declares that they have gathered enough mana and should seize the moment to take down the statues. Ku nods in agreement, channeling the mana he's received to strike at the enemies, shattering several of the stone figures. Yet, despite their efforts, more statues continue to emerge, relentlessly advancing toward them. As a new wave crashes toward them, Ku grins, declaring it the perfect opportunity to unleash his full power. Sela, feeling a twinge of fear, glances around until her eyes land on someone being tossed aside. It's Takumi. Despite his injuries, he's still alive, and a spark of determination ignites within her. She contemplates rushing to his side to offer her healing touch. However, the protagonist arrives first, confronting the man who stole his sword. Haruto wastes no time. He swiftly retrieves what he came for. As he examines the sword with his system, he discovers that it has been fully restored. Glancing at Sela, he realizes that she is undoubtedly a curse bearer like him, igniting a desire to replicate her abilities at the first opportunity. For now, however, he has a different target in mind. The protagonist reaches out to Takumi, attempting to replicate his abilities. Yet Takumi proves to be far stronger, making the task impossible. Just as despair begins to set in, his system presents an alternative. It informs him that as long as the target views him as an enemy, he can simply eliminate him to acquire his skills. Haruto glances at Takumi's HP and realizes it's dangerously low. Perhaps he can absorb his abilities without having to resort to murder. Forced absorption could prove to be quite useful in the future, depending on the circumstances. As Ku approaches, he recognizes the girl's healing abilities and instructs her to heal Takumi, just enough to keep him alive. He removes her handcuffs, explaining that he has a few questions for Takumi and can't afford to let him die just yet. The girl glances at the protagonist, her expression tinged with suspicion. Despite everything, she fulfills the request. Her healing ability is so extraordinary that it even regenerates Takumi's severed arm. The protagonist watches in awe, realizing that her skill rivals his own. Moments later, Takumi awakens, laughter escaping his lips. Sela, puzzled, asks why he's laughing. He simply replies that, in the end, both of them manage to survive. Once healed, Takumi finds himself handcuffed. Nanase warns him not to do anything foolish, explaining that the choice to spare his life wasn't hers, so they didn't hold back. Takumi, however, responds with a smile, declaring that simply being alive fills him with joy and insists that this dungeon adventure has only just begun. Suddenly, a blinding ray of light bursts forth from the back of the room. Terrified, Takumi bolts in the opposite direction. Just as his pursuers make a move to stop him, Nanase shifts her focus to dodging the deadly beam of light. Her brother, concerned for her safety, attempts to intervene. However, the threat is far more severe than he understands. Sensing the impending danger, Nanase desperately tries to warn him to stay back. Satoru's reckless nature blinds him to reason, prompting the little golem to step in. Just 30 minutes earlier, a horde of skeletons had launched an attack, but Ku swiftly thwarted them with his powers. As the magical stones rained down from the defeated foes, Ku offered the boy a chance to keep them, though he cautioned that their value was minimal. Yet it was Satoru's golem that eagerly consumed the stones, devouring them without a second thought. As a result, the golem leveled up. Satoru felt a surge of joy at witnessing his minion's evolution. However, when he reached out to touch it, he was taken aback by an unexpected development. The small golem had acquired a new ability. Returning to the present, Nanase rushed toward her brother and, as she drew closer, she realized that Satoru was being shielded by the golem. Both he and the protagonist are taken aback, realizing that the little one has acquired a skill that enables it to temporarily fuse with its master. From a distance, Ku observes this ability and notes its striking resemblance to Takajuchi Gu's skill. He can't help but wonder if it's connected to the core of the golem they had defeated earlier. However, he quickly dismisses those thoughts. There are more pressing matters at hand. As he becomes the new target of the box that guards the heart, Haras cautions him to tread carefully. The attack is composed of pure mana, so dense that it can penetrate magical barriers. In response, Nanase reveals that this attack can be physically blocked. Soon, she too finds herself in the line of fire, but true to her word, she skillfully deflects the boxed assault with her sword. The protagonist comes to a startling realization. The sheer density of the attack means that physical defenses are far more effective than magical ones. However, he quickly discovers a troubling limitation. He can't move and defend simultaneously. As his infinite mana generation ability fuels the box containing the heart, it only grows stronger. He understands that he must find a way to stop it. Otherwise, he and his companions are doomed. Haruto recalls that the member of the Blood Tower Guild could traverse shadows, even within the threads of the giant spider queens. Seizing this opportunity, he wraps himself in spider webs, effectively cloaking himself from view. With this clever disguise, he stealthily approaches the box, remaining undetected and safe from its potential dangers. Haruto contemplates whether the dragon's shockwave could be powerful enough to obliterate the box. Determined to put his theory to the test, he unleashes a massive explosion. The blast leaves him injured, a consequence of the mana he had converted to fuel the attack. Frustration wells up inside him as he glares at the box, exclaiming, "I've been the one feeding you mana." Without hesitation, Haruto envelops the box in his webs, crafting a makeshift sarcophagus. Ku observes the protagonist's clever use of the giant golem's relentless assault. Nanase catches on too, her admiration evident. She isn't alone in her awe. Eris shares the same impressed expression. Even Satoru, the ever-loyal sidekick, can't help but commend the protagonist's impressive performance. Yet, the box remains relentless, and Haruto quickly understands that mere praise won't be enough to subdue it. Determined, he weaves a protective barrier of webs around himself, convinced that if he can just make contact with the box one more time, he might finally contain its power. With focused effort, he reaches out and, against all odds, manages to touch it. With the box ensnared in webs, he activates the dragon's skill once more. This time, he not only shatters the box, but also crushes the heart within, sending shockwaves through the area. Despite the destruction, a sense of satisfaction washes over him. He has achieved his goal. His system chimes in, notifying him that Haruto has leveled up significantly as a result. It even rewarded him with a copy of the giant golem's heart. However, the item's function is to generate infinite mana, something he already possesses. This leaves him feeling frustrated. On the bright side, he can replicate this item as many times as he wishes. Just imagine the possibilities. But before he can fully indulge in his thoughts, Satoru comes rushing in, attempting to hug him in celebration of his achievement. The protagonist isn't keen on the idea, and he's not alone in his hesitation. Ku steps forward, offering his congratulations on the impressive feat. However, Nanis interjects, advising Ku that if he's going to praise someone, he should do it genuinely. Otherwise, it might come off as insincere. Ku shrugs it off, stating that he needs to have a serious talk with Haruto as soon as they return. The protagonist, seizing the moment, suggests that if Ku is interested in the golem's heart, he could sell it to him for a fair price. Nanis attempts to intervene, suggesting that Haruto should address important matters like this with the association rather than in such a manner. This ignites a debate between Ku and Ines, as they hold differing opinions on the golem's heart. Regardless of their disagreement, the protagonist takes decisive action. He hands the recovered longsword to Erez, expressing his sincere regret for everything that has transpired. Erez beams with gratitude, thanking Mor for keeping his promise. However, Mor suddenly confronts him, accusing him of using the same dark ability as their enemy. As if on cue, Ku arrives at the same conclusion. The protagonist, feeling cornered, quickly attempts to deflect the accusation, insisting that he doesn't move through shadows. His spider ability had leveled up, granting him astonishing speed. That's why they didn't notice him reach the chest. Nanis interjected, insisting it wasn't the time for distractions. They needed to return immediately to interrogate the prisoners. In a moment of desperation, Takumi pleaded with Ciola to reset the dungeon so they could make their escape. She called him crazy but ultimately relented, declaring that this would be the last time. Takumi inquires if her concern stems from discovering the man who generates infinite mana. If that's the case, he worries she might suddenly forget about their contract. He explains that it's a permanent restriction bracelet known as a Damus Baus that ensures she can never betray him. With a serious tone, he reminds Ciola that she can never abandon him, as her parents' lives rest in his hands. With that, Takumi urges her to reset the dungeon, reminding her that he risked his life to save her, and now it's her turn to repay the favor. He adds that the mana in this place should be more than sufficient for her to accomplish it. Meanwhile, Haruto senses a surge of mana and realizes what Ciola is doing. He quickly warns everyone to run, as the dungeon is on the verge of resetting. Harris's anxiety deepens. If this continues, who knows how many alternate dimensions might emerge this time? The protagonist realizes he must intervene. Without hesitation, he taps into his shadow ability and approaches the girl, determined to stop her. "Why are you doing this?" Haruto asks, his voice filled with concern. Overwhelmed by sorrow, Ciola struggles to find her words, tears streaming down her face. She continues the procedure undeterred. The protagonist rushes to stop Ciola, pulling her away from the spot. In that moment, a massive wave of energy erupts around them. He instinctively raises his magical force shield for protection, while Erez does the same, shielding herself and the others. However, despite their efforts, the dungeon begins to regenerate. The issue lies in the fact that only those within the force field are able to escape, with the protagonist and Ciola left behind. Watching everything crumble around them, Satoru's concern for Haruto intensifies. Meanwhile, Nanase gazes at the sky, which strikingly resembles Tokyo's, and questions its significance. Erez is uncertain, lost in thought, when suddenly, a voice calls out to Nanase. It's her father, who questions how she ended up there. His gaze shifts, and he notices Shinoda Makoto standing nearby, prompting him to ask why he's present as well. Makoto replies, "That's exactly what I'm wondering too." He inquires whether they successfully conquered the dungeon, but his gaze falls on the empty spaces around him, leaving Ku without an answer. It's not just him. Nanase and the others share the same concern for the protagonist's well-being. Meanwhile, deep within the dungeon, Takumi questions why the area hasn't fully restored yet. Ciola responds, explaining that Haruto intervened, which prevented her from completing the restoration process. Takumi dismisses the concern, stating it doesn't matter, since the others have left, granting him the freedom to act. As long as he possesses the giant golem's heart, he believes everything will be fine. However, the protagonist has no intention of relinquishing it so easily. He quickly activates his spider ability, preparing to defend himself against Takumi's advances. But his system suddenly alerts him that he can't use it right now, leaving Haruto utterly bewildered. Ciola has just come to the realization that it wasn't the dungeon that was reset, it was herself. The same revelation strikes the protagonist. He checks his system and discovers that all of his attributes have been reset, leaving only his copy and paste ability, now at level 1. However, his system also indicates that an unconfirmed object has been copied and can be pasted, a concept that leaves the protagonist scratching his head in confusion. Before Haruto could react, he was suddenly attacked by Takumi. Sensing the protagonist's desperation, Takumi seized the opportunity to strike. Haruto understood that the cursed ability still lingered, and this unverified copied object might be a remnant of his former self before the reset. He contemplates the possibility of remaining in his current state until Takumi is dealt with. To his surprise, Mor is also trapped in the dungeon, stepping in to shield him from further attacks. Haruto is taken aback. He never expected to find Mor here. "Run, Haruto," Mor urges, determination in his voice. "Leave the enemy to me. I'll be more useful outside." But Haruto shakes his head, resolute. "I can't do that." Takumi takes a decisive step forward, declaring that he stands on a much higher level than his opponents, making the power gap unmistakably clear. A low-level hunter like Mor is no match for him. As the attack unfolds, Mor is unable to withstand the force and collapses to the ground after taking a hit. With a cold determination, Takumi states that he was planning to strike against the International Association anyway, so he might as well begin now. Mor insists that he just needs to hold out a little longer. But before another blow can land, Haruto steps in, taking the hit for him. Confused, Mor looks on as Haruto firmly states that he doesn't need help and urges Mor to escape while he still can. Just then, Takumi interjects, reminding them that they're wasting time with all this talking. With a swift, decisive blow, he slices Haruto in half, leaving everyone present in stunned silence. Takumi seizes the opportunity to claim the golem's heart, confident that even with his stats reset, the hunter still retained his inventory. He turns to Scylla, assuring her that he is the only one she can truly trust. He believes that once the boy realizes she has restored him to his original state, he will understand the depth of her intentions. Takumi muses that he might be in the afterlife, feeling a strange sense of gratitude since he has lost everything. Suddenly, he's jolted from his thoughts as his hand is severed, a scream of agony escaping his lips. In that moment, Haruto appears, a chilling smile on his face. "Thank you for killing me," he says, relief evident in his voice. "I was worried the enemy wouldn't finish the job." Both Scylla and Mor stand frozen, shock etched on their faces. Takumi stands in utter disbelief, convinced that the protagonist was truly dead. "What kind of ability brought you back?" he demands, fury igniting within him as he lunges at Haruto, intent on finishing the job. However, Haruto seems to have regained all his powers, ensnaring Takumi in a web of shimmering strands. Desperate, Takumi attempts to use his shadow movement ability to escape, but finds himself trapped. Frustrated, he turns to Scylla, barking in order for her to reset the dungeon once more. She insists she can't comply. Takumi swiftly reminds her of their contract, warning her that if she wishes to stay alive, she must follow his orders. The bracelet binding Scylla to the contract tightens painfully, a cruel reminder of the consequences of defiance. Haruto comes to a startling realization. The reason she's obeying someone so vile lies within that bracelet. Determined to help her break free, he rushes towards Scylla and seizes the bracelet. Channeling his dragon shock wave, he shatters the item with a powerful blast. In that moment, Scylla feels an overwhelming sense of freedom, her emotions surging as she begins to understand the weight of her liberation. Takumi seethes with rage, consumed by thoughts of revenge against the protagonist. His fury intensifies as he realizes he can no longer access his abilities. The protagonist calmly explains that he now holds control over Takumi's powers. Seizing the moment, he strikes, leaving Takumi completely vulnerable. With that decisive blow, Takumi is finally defeated. Haruto gazes upon the giant golem's heart once more, a symbol of their hard-fought battle. He reveals that this item was the catalyst for the creation of an entire dungeon where countless lives were lost. With a surge of determination, he unleashes the shockwave once more, shattering the heart and declaring that people like Takumi are unworthy of possessing it. In doing so, he claims a crucial item, having been the one to conquer the dungeon. Moments later, the door to the Heart's chamber swings open, granting entry to the hunters waiting outside. They belong to the same team as Ku and immediately recognize the protagonist. The leader steps forward, inquiring about the whereabouts of the others. Haruto responds that they split up, assuring them there's nothing to worry about. The leader raises an eyebrow, asking if that means the protagonist cleared the dungeon solo. Haruto mentions that he just completed the dungeon shortly before their arrival, but now he's eager to leave with them. The following day, outside the dungeon, he reunites with the others. Meanwhile, inside the headquarters of the Japanese Hunters Organization, the directors convene for an urgent meeting, fully aware of the recent events. Shinoda Makoto expresses disbelief that the Golem Heart dungeon has opened pathways to multiple dimensions, emphasizing that this is a significant issue that impacts not only their organization, but the world at large. Gu acknowledges his newfound understanding, which sheds light on the appearance of creatures from other realms in the city. Fuwa emphasizes that the key point is the connection to Hunter Nishihara, as the multi-dimensional dungeon serves as a harbinger of the disaster that struck 5 years ago. However, the others caution against jumping to conclusions, noting that it's still premature to make judgments since only one multi-dimensional dungeon has collapsed thus far. Now that the chaos has subsided, the group is reluctant to delve deeper into the matter. Nanis, overhearing their reluctance, feels a surge of irritation. She offers a brief apology but insists she must leave to investigate the enemies of the Blood Tower, believing they cannot resolve their issues without understanding their foes. Gu, sensing her frustration, retorts that Nanis is acting arrogantly, as if they had simply been goofing off, while they too have been occupied with the unfolding crisis. Ku attempts to lighten the mood, reminding everyone that, while they may not have all the answers, the guildmasters fought valiantly to fend off the monsters that attacked. Gu, however, brushes off the praise. "I'm not trying to boast about my achievements," he insists. "I just want to make it clear that I wasn't idle during all this." He then shifts his focus to the protagonist, referring to him as the one who cleared the dungeon single-handedly. Yet, despite the admiration, Gu still finds himself puzzled. But who exactly is Haruto? He asks, curiosity etched on his face. The protagonist replies that he's merely a simple hunter, but Gu isn't satisfied with that answer. He questions whether Haruto understands who he's speaking to. Haruto, puzzled, asks what he means by that. After all, Gu has successfully cleared the hidden dungeon with minimal losses and even uncovered the perilous multi-dimensional dungeon. Shouldn't Gu be celebrated for his achievements rather than just being referred to as the Master Takuchi of the Midas Guild? Gu remarks that the protagonist has quite the big mouth, noting that despite knowing who he is, he still behaves so insolently. Ku, taken aback by Gu's boldness, watches in disbelief as the others question whether Gu truly intends to activate his stone armor right then and there. Just as tensions rise, Fus intervenes, warning Gu that if he continues down this path, he won't receive the reward for containing the dungeon collapse. Though visibly displeased, Gu steps back, conceding that this time, the protagonist has managed to escape. Meanwhile, Haruto can't shake the thought. Could he replicate that stone armor ability? Moments later, President Fuwa summons everyone to his office and pointedly asks Haruto which association he belongs to. Haruto responds that he was once part of the Daikon Guild, but due to various circumstances, he has chosen to operate as a freelancer. Fuwa remarks that for a solo hunter, clearing an advanced dungeon is an impressive feat. Regardless, he expresses his gratitude on behalf of the association. Haruto beams with pride at being acknowledged by the organization's president. Fuwa then turns to the other hunters, thanking them as well, and inquires about their plans moving forward. Haru declares her intention to return to her association, while Mor expresses his desire to stay behind. He also reveals that he will be resigning from the International Association. Later that night, the protagonist is taken by surprise when Mor pays an unexpected visit to his home. Curious about the late hour, he asks what brings Mor there. With a serious tone, Mor explains that he no longer works for the International Association and seeks the protagonist's help for the time being. Eris inquires about the reasons behind Mor's actions, but he replies that he can't explain them just yet. Satoru chimes in, expressing his desire to stay with the protagonist as well. Nanis, however, clarifies that she's only present to resolve a few lingering doubts. Curiously, Haruto asks, "Where are the prisoners now?" Nanis reveals that Takumi is currently receiving treatment at the organization's hospital and will be transferred to a prison for interrogation as soon as he recovers. Ciola finds herself in the hot seat, being interrogated by the association. Despite the pressure, she remains tight-lipped, revealing nothing. The only request she makes is to see Haruto in person, a plea that leaves him deep in thought. Meanwhile, Nanase observes the tension, sensing an unspoken connection between them that she struggles to comprehend. She also mentions that Ciola is part of a highly popular idol group, adding another layer of intrigue to the situation. Satoru suddenly recalls that he has seen her face before, though he can't quite place where. The protagonist reveals that he destroyed the bracelet that linked Ciola to Takumi, severing their connection for good. He agrees to visit her later. Curiously, he turns to Ku, who has remained silent until now, and asks why he's there. Ku replies simply, "There's only one reason I'm here." Moore states that if he's after the golem's heart, it's too late. Haruto already destroyed it while still in the dungeon, leaving everyone in shock. The most outraged among them is Ku, who can hardly believe that the protagonist would destroy something so valuable. However, Haruto asks for a moment and retrieves the golem's heart from his inventory. He claims that the heart he destroyed was a fake, though in reality, he had copied the item and destroyed only a duplicate. Moore remains unconvinced by the excuse, having witnessed everything firsthand. After all, the dungeon couldn't have been cleared without the destruction of the real heart. Meanwhile, Ku recalls the protagonist's offer to sell the item for 5 billion. However, Nanase quickly interjects, advising him not to accept that price. She insists the item is worth far more, and counters with an offer of 8 billion on behalf of the association. Satoru pulls out his phone, revealing that rare items like this typically start at 10 billion in auctions. He advises the protagonist not to settle for anything less. Ku interjects, claiming the boy is merely a distraction, and reminds everyone that Haruto had promised to sell the item to him. With that, he raises his offer to 20 billion. The protagonist, seeing the opportunity, accepts the deal and sells the item. In a surprising twist, he walks away victorious, knowing he can replicate the heart as many times as he desires. With that thought, he believes he can endlessly clone the item and auction it online, paving his way to effortless riches. To top it off, he revels in the fact that he's nearly reached level 300. As if that weren't enough, he also acquired a unique item for clearing the dungeon. His system chimes in, informing him that this is a sealed item. The protagonist can break the seal by infusing it with mana, a task he eagerly accepts. The item morphs into a shimmering dimensional fragment. His system chimes in, revealing that if he gathers all 5 fragments, he'll unlock the ability to open portals to any dimension he desires. Haruto quickly understands that this is a 5-piece key, and he must track down the remaining 4. A thought crosses his mind. What if he could copy it until he has the complete set? However, as he attempts to do so, his system promptly warns him that this item cannot be duplicated. Realizing he must take the difficult path of searching for the other parts alone, Haruto is suddenly interrupted when Moore appears in his room. Moore states that he needs to confirm something with him. However, Haruto can't shake the feeling that something is off. To his surprise, Moore draws his sword right in front of him, leaving Haruto utterly bewildered. Without a word, Moore lunges forward and plunges his sword into Haruto's chest. As the scene darkens, a flashback unfolds, transporting us 15 years into the past. Europe had been ravaged by a catastrophic event, and amidst the chaos, a fearsome dragon named Drake unleashed its fiery wrath upon various locations. Hunters rallied to defend their lands, including a formidable mage who stood her ground, confronting the dragon with her powerful magic. From a distance, the others observed that the dragon remained unscathed, raising doubts about the possibility of defeating such a formidable beast. Their concerns deepened as they watched the dragon unleash a torrent of fire, incinerating everything in its path, including seasoned warriors. Among the witnesses was Moore, who had been cautioned by a companion against confronting the enemy due to its overwhelming power. Moore was reluctant to retreat, for he had witnessed the emergence of a monstrous entity that threatened to plunge the world into chaos. As a newly awakened rookie hunter, he understood that his recklessness could very well lead to his demise. Just when despair began to settle in, a figure emerged to aid him, someone he had long admired. It was none other than the world-renowned hunter, Frederick Hugh. Moore's heart swelled with gratitude as he looked to the heavens, believing he had found his salvation. But to their misfortune, Frederick was swiftly attacked by the dragon, who defeated him with a single devastating bite. At least that's what Moore initially thought. However, the dragon soon sensed something amiss. After consuming Frederick, it felt an unsettling disturbance within. Suddenly, a series of violent explosions erupted from its body, culminating in a catastrophic explosion that tore it apart from the inside out. Moore was bewildered by what he witnessed, but it quickly dawned on him that Frederick had a hidden advantage. His admiration for the hunter deepened, yet he still couldn't grasp how his favorite hunter had pulled off such a feat until a figure emerged, shouting at Frederick, "We warned you not to use that trick in front of others." The renowned hunter quickly defended his actions, claiming it was an emergency that required swift action. His partner, Nishihara Haruka, chimed in, noting that at least they had managed to defeat the dragon. Though the devastation across the country was immense, Frederick approached Moore with a request to keep what he had witnessed a secret. For Moore, this was an easy promise to make after all. It was a favor from his favorite hero. Soon after, other hunters arrived, witnessing the dragon's defeat. Seizing the moment, the couple slipped away quietly, eager to avoid drawing any more attention. Before they departed, the newly awakened warrior introduced himself as Moore Grant, asking Frederick not to forget him. With a reassuring smile, Frederick promised he would remember the young man. After all, Moore had once stood before a warrior who had transcended death itself. Little did he know, he was about to encounter someone else with that same extraordinary ability. Back in the present, he felt a surge of determination. Despite the recklessness of his plan, he needed to see for himself if the protagonist truly possessed such power. To his astonishment, Haruto managed to escape and seize his sword. In that moment, Moore understood the truth. The protagonist indeed shared the same uncanny ability as Frederick Hugh, the ability to cheat death itself. He apologizes for the inconvenience, explaining that he needed to be sure. Satoru, taking in the entire scene, asks what's happening. The protagonist suddenly remembers the boy's presence and realizes they're facing a serious problem. Moments later, Moore kneels, offering another apology for his actions. The protagonist reassures him that it's not necessary. Meanwhile, Eris, filled with guilt, blames herself, recalling that she heard what happens when someone commits a major crime in the East. That's how they offer their apologies. However, Haruto insists that a simple dojeza isn't sufficient for taking a life. In response, Moore promises to make amends by supporting the protagonist from now on. Yet, Haruto reminds him that such a decision must be made together. Meanwhile, Satoru interjects, asking if it's true that Haruto possesses the same resurrection ability as Frederick Hugh, a secret Haruto would prefer to keep under wraps. Regardless, Satoru's enthusiasm for everything the protagonist does would remain unchanged, which is precisely why Haruto wanted to keep him out of the loop. Meanwhile, Naoki notices that Eris hasn't gone home yet and asks her why. She responds that she couldn't leave without discussing something important with him. With a serious tone, she reveals that she possesses one of the 5 multi-dimensional fragments. Haruto inquires if Eris's dimensional piece has begun to resonate unexpectedly. She confirms it has, and explains that she followed the reaction into this room. To her astonishment, she realizes her piece is number 1, while Haruto's is number 5. Curiosity piqued, she asks how he came by his fragment. Haruto explains that he received it as a reward for destroying the golem's heart. Eris reveals that she discovered her fragment among her mother's belongings. According to her mother's records, a fragment resonates when it's near another, which is how she was able to locate him. With this revelation, the protagonist realizes that finding the other 3 fragments might be more manageable. Intrigued, Satoru asks what these fragments actually do. Eris explains that, supposedly, when all 5 are gathered, the user can unlock doors to any dimension they desire. Haruto inquires whether that means they could open any dimensional dungeon. Eris confirms this, explaining that, just like the giant golem's heart dungeon, they can unlock others using the fragments they already possess. This revelation would significantly simplify their quest to locate the remaining fragments. In that moment, the protagonist realizes that the true reason Eris came to Japan was to gather more information about these elusive fragments. She believes her parents are alive in another dimension. Moore agrees, convinced they haven't truly died. Satoru wonders if their prolonged absence means the door to their dimension can only be opened from this side. Eris considers this, suggesting it's possible, but adds they might simply be waiting for the right moment to return. Meanwhile, Haruto contemplates a more unsettling thought. Perhaps they chose not to come back for a reason. Perhaps other disasters, equally as devastating as the one that struck 15 years ago, have begun to surface in other realms. Regardless, he insists that if they can open and close the dimensional gate using the key, they will be able to seal off multi-dimensional dungeons and avert another catastrophe. Satoru gazes at the fragments, puzzled, and questions how these pieces could possibly serve as the key. As the golem makes contact with the fragments, they collide and begin to merge, transforming into a new shape. A brilliant flash of light fills the room, momentarily blinding everyone. The boy, gripped by fear, believes he's facing certain doom. But as the light fades, he realizes it was merely the fragments coming together. Eris, equally astonished, watches the spectacle unfold. She had believed that they would only merge once all 5 pieces were gathered, but to her surprise, just 2 were enough for them to combine. She noted that the resonant sound grew louder, and she wasn't alone in this realization. The other scattered fragments were also responding. The elf, Midsoul, remarked that the humans who possessed the remaining pieces must truly be extraordinary. At last, the moment has come to return home to the headquarters of the Starfield Guild in Europe. Lord Michael reports that the Blood Tower Guild has failed its mission, his brow furrowing in concern. He glances at the elf, puzzled by the laughter that escapes him. Midsoul, still chuckling, congratulates the Lord on finally mastering the teleportation skill, teasing that he's on the brink of transcendence. Michael, with a hint of frustration, replies that for now, he can only manage short distances. He adds that the skill can only be improved through his copy ability, a reminder of the challenges still ahead. With that belief, the elf is convinced he will soon attain his desires. Michael inquires why Midsoul feels this way. She explains that her fragment is resonating strongly, indicating that at least one of the other fragments has connected, making it easier to locate the rest. Michael realizes this means all 5 pieces have been found, and Midsoul will soon be able to return to her homeland. He inquires whether there are any more keys in her home dimension. The elf responds that there is indeed a dimensional key there, but the door to that dimension cannot be opened from that side. 15 years ago, that cursed witch, Nishihara Haruka, sealed all the doors to dimensions connected to Earth, including the dimensional keys on Earth itself. Those keys were divided into 5 pieces and hidden away in separate locations. Michael realizes that by piecing everything together and unlocking the key, they can reconnect the dimensional door. Midsoul nods in agreement. She explains that their first step is to open the dimensional door to her homeland in the fairy realm, leading to the sacred cosmic tree, Adrazal. There, a unique gift awaits, one that has the power to replicate other gifts if absorbed, fostering their growth. Michael nods in agreement, acknowledging that the plan has merit. Curiously, he turns to the elf and asks if she was taken aback when she first witnessed his abilities. He reveals that he is well aware of Midsoul's true intentions. Moreover, he understands that her dimension has been corrupted since the cosmic tree was tainted centuries ago, leaving it on the brink of collapse of fate, known as the Dark Age Rasal. 15 years ago, during the Great Disaster, Earth and the Elven dimension became intertwined. In that chaotic moment, the elves attempted to transfer the source of corruption to Earth, but Nishihara intervened, thwarting their plans. Now the elves are determined to reconnect their realm with Earth to execute the scheme that once failed. Michael is all too aware that he is merely a pawn in their game, used to fulfill their ambitions. He insists he's indifferent to the consequences, believing he can use the elf to unlock the multi-dimensional dungeon and absorb even greater abilities. If that means becoming like the transcendent beings, he's willing to disregard the fate of this world and take matters into his own hands. However, Midsoul interjects, reminding him that he is the leader of Starfield, the prestigious multinational guild. If he moves without a clear reason, it could raise suspicion and draw unwanted attention. She mentions that, as a precaution, she has already instructed Lucas to implement Plan B. Once everything is in place, she will personally provide Lord Michael with a legitimate reason to take action. Meanwhile, in an advanced dungeon in Japan, powerful creatures known as gnolls are preparing to launch their attack. Satoru, visibly anxious, warns the protagonist that they are outnumbered. He suggests a retreat, but Haruto's mind races back to the moment he had to plead with the hunter Nanase to join them on this dungeon expedition. Now, as his companions consider pulling back, he feels a surge of determination. This is the perfect opportunity to level up his golem, and he refuses to let it slip away. Haruto boldly challenges his enemies to come at him with everything they've got. As they charge fiercely, his friends watch in concern, but Haruto remains unfazed. Instead, he conjures a swarm of mini-golems to aid him in battle. His friends look on in awe, impressed by his confidence and skill. Haruto can't help but celebrate. This is precisely the kind of challenge he had been hoping for. Moore is left stunned, questioning how this is even possible. As the golems advance toward the enemies, the gnolls seem to hold an advantage. Satoru watches with concern. The enemies are formidable, their vitality and levels clearly superior. Yet, to everyone's surprise, the golems retaliate, revealing they are far stronger than they initially appeared. They gather in clusters, launching an assault on every gnoll in sight. Soon, Satoru comes to a startling realization. The protagonist had everything under control from the very beginning. As he watches his golems effortlessly defeat the enemies, Haruto acknowledges that their durability and power have truly grown. As he attempts to return the summoned creatures to his inventory, he quickly discovers that he no longer has the necessary storage space. The size of each summon affects the time it takes to store them, and he finds himself at a loss. Just when frustration begins to set in, Satoru suggests reaching out to Master Kinosaki for assistance. Given his extensive knowledge of dungeons, he's bound to have some valuable insights. The protagonist nods, realizing this could be a promising idea. Once they exit the dungeon, they climb into Satoru's car. Haruto is surprised to discover that Satoru can drive. With a casual smile, Satoru reveals that he received the car from his father on his coming-of-age birthday. In the hustle of their daily lives, Haruto often forgets, but this moment serves as a stark reminder. Satoru is the son of the leader of one of the most powerful groups in the country. He then calls Nanas, asking if she's on her way to the association. Satoru mentions that this is sudden and inquires if everything is all right. The protagonist suspects it might be related to Ciola and feels an urgent need to see her. He urges Satoru to hurry. Moments later, they all arrive at the location where the girl is being kept under surveillance. Immediately, Haruto realizes that something is seriously wrong. Nanas reveals she hasn't spoken in 3 days, refusing to eat or drink, insisting that only Haruto can communicate with her. Haruto asks if they can talk without being recorded, but Nanas warns that it could disrupt the recording process. A wave of anxiety washes over him. He fears his copying ability might be revealed, yet the desire to replicate the girl's ability and help her outweighs his concerns. With a deep breath, he accepts the risk. He steps into the room, holding a glass of water. There's nothing in this glass but water, he insists, urging her to take a sip. As he settles in front of her, the girl snatches the glass and drinks eagerly, as if she were parched. Observing her desperation, Nanas remarks that she was on the brink of dehydration. Haruto then leans in, asking if she's aware of his extraordinary ability to generate infinite mana. Ciola offers a deal. If Haruto helps her, she will cooperate with the investigation. But first, he needs to clarify something. He asks her if her primary ability is to revert anything to its previous state. She nods in affirmation. With this confirmation, Haruto's suspicions are validated. He isn't the only one cursed. A spark of realization ignites within him. If he can replicate her ability, he could potentially mimic any similar power. He comes to a startling realization. Ciola's ability isn't healing in the traditional sense. It's the power to revert things to their original state. This explains how she was able to repair the sword. Unlike her, Satoru struggles to grasp the mechanics of this ability, or its true potential. Back in the room, Ciola reveals that her parents have been in a coma for a long time. With a mix of hope and desperation, she turns to the protagonist, asking for help to awaken them. Recognizing that he is the only one capable of generating the mana her family desperately needs, Haruto agrees to help her. However, he warns her that he's about to do something a bit impolite, leaving everyone outside in a state of confusion. With a swift motion, he frees the girl from her handcuffs and gently takes her hand, intending to copy her ability. What surprises him most is that his copying ability fails against her, leaving him stunned as his system notifies him that it's impossible to replicate her. Ciola, confused, asks what Haruto is doing. Sensing the awkwardness of the moment, he quickly releases her hand. Just then, another alert chimes in, revealing that if he eliminates the target, forced absorption could become an option. Only then will copying become a viable option for the future. He realizes that to achieve this, he would have to eliminate the girl and anyone else who poses a similar restriction, something he is reluctant to do. Despite not knowing her well, the protagonist isn't a killer. He refuses to pursue his desires at any cost. Yet, the urge to replicate her ability gnaws at him, prompting him to search for an alternative solution. Outside, Satoru notices Haruto's unusual behavior and questions him about it. Nanas, using the microphone, checks in, asking if everything is all right. Haruto reassures them, but he knows he must tread carefully. He resolves to first listen to Ciola's request, aiming to earn her trust in the process. With that foundation laid, he agrees to visit the girl's parents and assist them in their recovery. That same day, they make their way to the hospital. Ciola reveals that during the Great Disaster, her family was attacked by a mysterious monster, and this is the only hospital equipped to treat her parents. Haruto ponders the situation, suspecting that whoever is hospitalized may be the reason behind the partnership with Takumi likely to cover the mounting medical expenses. He inquires if Takumi is hospitalized there. Nanase confirms, saying he's in the basement and will be transferred to prison after his recovery. Concerned, Nanase then asks if Ciola is all right. She reassures him that she is. But just then, Moore, who is with them, notices something unusual about a man walking by and wonders what he's doing there. The man ascends to another floor, where security is significantly tighter. As he approaches, the guards command him to halt, reminding him that only authorized personnel are allowed beyond this point. Undeterred, the mysterious figure flashes a badge, insisting he needs to pass, but as the guard inspects the so-called badge, he quickly realizes it's nothing more than a random piece of paper. This moment of distraction marked his downfall, as it gave him the opportunity to deal with the guards. Under the influence of a dark aura, they became submissive to the one who had summoned the shadow. The mysterious man commanded the guards to gather the necessary items, clearing his path of any obstacles. He begins to channel a dark magic aura, swirling around him like a tempest. A flashback unfolds, revealing Lord Lucas, the one tasked with this mission. Nidzel had entrusted him with a responsibility, insisting that he was the only one capable of seeing it through. She warns him of the possibility that the Blood Tower might falter in its purpose, and instructs him to place the magic orb in various locations throughout Tokyo. Curiosity piqued, Lucas asks, "What exactly is this orb?" She explains that it's a contaminated fruit from a drazzle, a tree native to her homeland. With this fruit, one can create a barrier and open a subspace. Lucas, slightly bewildered, insists he needs to see it to believe it. When Nitzel reveals the fruit, he is taken aback by its power. The elf then adds that, in this dimension, this is the extent of what she can demonstrate with just one fruit. She urges Lord Lucas to devise a reason for Starfield and Michael to act openly. Back in the present, Lucas contemplates Nidzel's intentions, suspecting he aims to trigger a dungeon break in the heart of Tokyo. Though he feels uneasy about it, he realizes there's no turning back now. With his family's deep ties and Starfield's influence, he knows he must press on. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Scylla's father stirs from his coma, finally receiving the treatment he desperately needed. As he glances to the side, Satoru notices that his wife has also been healed, and their daughter is there with them. The sight of this family reunion overwhelms him with emotion. However, his sister disapproves of his tears, clearly uncomfortable with his display of vulnerability. Satoru turns his gratitude toward the protagonist, marveling at their skill. Not even high-level healers could bring back patients from such long comas, he remarks, awed by the miracle before him. Nanis is amazed by the potential of this revertibility. If harnessed properly, that girl could be a valuable asset to the association. Determined to keep a close eye on her, she resolves to monitor the situation directly. Meanwhile, the protagonist realizes Moore is missing and inquires about his whereabouts. But Erez is just as clueless. In the same hospital, Lucas attempts to leave, accompanied by Takumi. Suddenly, an alert flashes in his system, indicating that a revertibility user is nearby. Curious, he turns to Takumi and asks if he knows anything about it. Takumi, upon hearing this, immediately understands who Lucas is talking about. A wave of realization washes over him as he recognizes that he's in the same hospital as Scylla's parents. The unsettling thought strikes him. The man who once freed him might now be standing among his enemies. Just then, Lucas hears someone calling his name. It's Moore, who approaches with a hint of surprise. "I almost didn't recognize you with that hat," he remarks. He wonders aloud why someone from the International Hunter Association is in Japan, but quickly connects the dots. His target is none other than Starfield's dog, Kurosaki Takumi. Lucas, curious, mentions that he heard Moore had left the International Association. "So, what brings you here?" he asks. Moore bluntly states that Takumi is a dangerous criminal, and anyone attempting to free him is automatically a potential enemy. Lucas, eager to reason, insists they can't fight in a hospital. Meanwhile, Takumi, undeterred, requests a sword, confident that defeating Moore will be a breeze, since he's alone and powerless without his abilities. Suddenly, Haruto steps in, declaring that Moore isn't alone. As the protagonist unleashes his shadow ability, Takumi's fury ignites. The two engage in a heated exchange of taunts. But amidst the chaos, Lucas observes the protagonist closely. A spark of excitement lights up his face as he realizes this individual possesses the power to copy and replicate abilities. Just when the tension reaches its peak, Nanaze arrives, ready to confront the fugitive. Takumi is taken completely by surprise. Beside him, Lucas stares in awe at what he refers to as the Sword Witch, pondering if she might be some kind of final boss. Meanwhile, Nanase stands before the hunters, casually remarking that their horoscopes aren't looking too promising today. Takumi urges them to resist, but Lucas remains silent until a pair of handcuffs is suddenly thrown their way. These aren't ordinary handcuffs. They're devices designed to suppress abilities. Nanas proposes that if they agree to use the device, everything can be resolved peacefully. However, Takumi finds the idea too humiliating. In a desperate move, he seizes a woman as a hostage. "This is a hospital," he warns. "And if a fight breaks out, innocent people will get hurt. I know you hunters don't want that." He insists that this is his way of achieving peace. However, he didn't anticipate Nanase charging at him. The kick Takumi received sent him soaring through the air like a rag doll. To make matters worse, he didn't just feel the impact. He was left battered and bruised, even coughing up blood. Lucas realizes the attack was so swift that he barely registered it until Nanase calls his attention. She observes that Lucas seems different from Takumi and suggests they try to resolve the situation peacefully. As Lucas glances at Takumi's battered state, he begins to seriously reflect on her words, questioning whether he and Takumi are truly that different after all. Earlier, Lucas inquired of Mid-Soul why he had been selected for this mission. The elf explained that the cosmic tree had been tainted by dark mana, which could poison ordinary humans. However, she assured him that he was different and immune to its effects. The same applied to the Master of the Blood Tower. This revelation caught Lucas off guard. Mid-Soul then added that Kurosaki Takumi had also breached the international treaty by employing abilities that relied on dark mana. To make the contaminated cosmic tree bloom, they must harness abilities fueled by dark mana. Lucas recalls the elf's words and the time he tainted the security guards, leading him to a troubling realization he is indeed similar to Kurosaki Takumi. With this unsettling thought, he concludes that a peaceful resolution is impossible. He draws his sword, declaring that he needs Kurosaki Takumi alive and will stop at nothing to take him. Nanase quickly realizes that this is no ordinary weapon. Moore reaches the same conclusion upon recognizing the rapier Angelus, a sign that Lucas is dead serious. He explains that this sword has been passed down through generations in Lucas's family, one of the Holy Knight bloodlines of Great Britain, and it is the only holy sword in existence. Not only that, but the sword rivals the power of the collision dragon. The rapier Angelus is designed for slashing rather than stabbing. Lucas acknowledges this, but points out that unlike the longsword, it lacks raw attack power. Instead, it adjusts levels and is infamous as the Inquisitor of Heretics, capable of nullifying any abilities and weapons it deems heretical. As a result, the hunter Nanase, wielding the magical sword Witchblade, finds herself at a disadvantage. She valiantly defends herself with her weapon, but soon realizes it pales in comparison to her opponent's sword. This realization stirs concern in the protagonist, who watches anxiously as Nanase struggles against the odds. Nanase firmly tells him not to interfere, reminding him that they are in a hospital and she wants to avoid causing more chaos. With surprising skill, she manages to defend herself and regain control of the situation, leaving Lucas astonished. He never imagined she could pull it off. Seizing the moment of distraction, Nanase launches an attack, but she narrowly misses her target. Lucas raises an eyebrow and asks, "Aren't you going to use your abilities just because we're in a hospital?" He questions whether she truly believes she can stand against his sword like that. Lucas attempts to project confidence, but with each of Nanase's attacks, he finds himself increasingly off balance. Her strength inches closer to landing a blow, and despite his efforts to defend, he ends up wounded, even bleeding from the force of her strikes. Even before their swords fully clash, Lucas can feel the damage to his internal organs. The gap in their strength is staggering. She is the 10th strongest in the world. With a calm demeanor, Nanase asks if her opponent is finally ready to embrace peace. Lucas, feeling increasingly cornered, realizes this battle is far more challenging than he had anticipated. In the hospital, he refrains from using his abilities, much like Nanase. Their intense fight is suddenly interrupted, drawing both of their attention. Haruto, however, catches something that the others have missed. Takumi seizes the distraction to activate one of Dressel's poison fruits. He reveals that the hospital they are so fiercely protecting is on the brink of disappearing entirely. Lucas attempts to intervene, urging Takumi to reconsider his actions. Takumi explains that the plan involves placing these fruits in key locations throughout Tokyo, and in this instance, the hospital should have been one of those sites. The protagonist, confused, asks Takumi to clarify what he means. Moore identifies the ominous energy as dark mana, commonly wielded by practitioners of dark magic. To his shock, he reveals that Takumi is among them. However, the situation is dire. Dark mana is accumulating rapidly, threatening to poison the innocent patients in the hospital. Determined to intervene, the protagonist attempts to contain the dark mana with his spiderwebs, but Takumi's chilling response cuts through the tension. It's already too late. Haruto struggles to grasp the meaning behind it all, until he finally realizes that the fruit is the source of the dark mana. Suddenly, roots begin to emerge from the fruit, tearing through the hospital as they spread across the floors and plunge deep into the ground, giving rise to a colossal, shadowy tree. A sudden crater erupts in the hospital, threatening to swallow patients whole. In a flash, a rescue task force is mobilized, but chaos ensues when a woman tumbles into the gaping hole. Just in time, the protagonist, Haruto, springs into action, using his spiderwebs to snatch her from the brink. Once she's safely back on solid ground, he urges her to heed the evacuation orders and escape the chaos as quickly as possible. She rises to her feet and expresses her gratitude. The protagonist glances around, noting the numerous patients, but he realizes that the real issue lies deeper. Many of them are unable to move on their own. He isn't alone in this struggle. Nanis is tending to a group of children, while Moore lends a hand as well. Yet, the hospital is shrouded in dark mana, and if it remains like this, everyone within its walls risks being consumed by its corruption. The only option left is to restore the hospital to its former state. Meanwhile, some individuals remain trapped beneath the debris. Satoru, determined, uses his small gaunt to rescue them. Just as he finishes, the protagonist arrives, prompting Satoru to ask, "What really happened here?" Haruto casually inquires if everything is under control, to which Satoru replies that the situation has only remained stable thanks to Ares. Speaking of her, Haruto realizes he hasn't seen Ares since the impact. Satoru leads him to her location, and as they arrive, Haruto notices a section enveloped in ice. Ares explains that she conjured the barrier, which ultimately protected the hospital's infirmary from destruction. Despite her efforts, she couldn't fully block the dark mana. Nevertheless, the protagonist felt a wave of relief to see her safe. He turned to Scylla, his expression serious as he explained that the entire hospital had been devastated, now engulfed by dark mana. The quickest way to remedy the situation would be to restore the place, but he was aware that she had already exerted her powers recently. He hesitated for a moment before asking, "Do you think you can do it again?" Scylla agrees, noting that restoring a hospital is a far cry from tackling a dungeon, especially with him around to manage the mana. Moments later, they arrive at the heart of the situation, where the colossal tree has taken root. Satoru gazes up in awe, remarking that the tree is even larger than he had envisioned. He wonders aloud how such a magnificent thing could materialize so suddenly. Haruto shakes his head, explaining that it was all Takumi's doing. He planted the tree, and then vanished without a trace. Scylla believes Takumi acted recklessly, fully aware that his parents were present, and this realization only fuels her anger toward him. Regardless, they must act swiftly to restore the hospital. The protagonist steps in, providing the mana the girl requires. With determination, Scylla places her hand on the tree, initiating the restoration process. Haruto begins to feel the effects of the process, and he notices that it is indeed working. As the roots start to retreat, everyone watches with bated breath. The spectacle is truly remarkable. Even the tree seems to respond, pulling back some of its roots. But just as hope begins to rise, the tree suddenly fights back against the reversal. Not only does the tree attack, but it also sends a wave of danger coursing through Scylla. Haruto senses it as well, noticing the dark mana seeping from the tree. Without hesitation, he rushes to Scylla's side, creating a protective web barrier around them. Then, harnessing his shadow movement ability, he swiftly escapes from the tree, pulling her to safety. Satoru approaches, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" he asks. The reply is a quick yes, but Scylla's condition tells a different story. She was struck, and her restoration process has been interrupted. Urgently, he instructs Satoru to take charge of the evacuation and get everyone moving before the dark mana engulfs them. Without hesitation, Satoru scoops up Scylla and begins the evacuation. Meanwhile, Ares lingers nearby, and the protagonist turns to her, eager to know what she understands about the situation. She explains that, according to her mother, this originates from another dimension, the corrupted fruit of the cosmic tree known as Yggdrasil. It seems this fruit may have been captured and transported here. Since the main body of the tree exists in a different dimension, the restoration spell likely failed to affect it. The fruit serves as a barrier, likely positioned in 3 or 4 strategic locations around Tokyo. 10 minutes later, in front of the hospital, the rescue team works frantically to assist those in need. Meanwhile, mage hunters strive to maintain stability in the area, battling the overwhelming presence of dark mana, a daunting task that proves far from simple. Fuwa, who was also on site, remarks that if he weren't witnessing it firsthand, he wouldn't believe that a fruit from the cosmic tree had manifested right in the heart of Tokyo. Nana arrives with the others, bringing more news about Takumi and Lucas. Du questions how Nana could allow someone so significant to slip away. He also wonders about the connection between an international hunter and Lucas. Speaking up, he points out that the Blood Tower is a Japanese guild and asks why someone from the International Association would be interested in the local leader. He plans to capture Takumi once more to interrogate him personally, but suddenly he senses a shift in the atmosphere. The ground begins to tremble violently, sending everyone into a panic as they fear the hospital might collapse. Just then, a voice cuts through the chaos, announcing that they have a serious problem. Another tree has emerged, this time in the Kita area. The protagonist is taken aback. He hadn't anticipated the emergence of another tree so soon. As the second mysterious tree appears, news quickly spreads across Japan. The Hunters Association issues a warning about the dangers posed by the dark mana it emits, leaving the local population in a state of fear. In response, the government declares a state of calamity and urges residents to evacuate the Tokyo metropolitan area. Upon witnessing the chaos unfold, Takumi feels a surge of satisfaction. This was precisely his goal. He commends Lucas for his ingenuity, admitting that he hadn't thought to use dark mana against the population until Lucas arrived. The news broadcast continues, reassuring everyone that as long as the exposure remains under 24 hours, there's no risk of mana poisoning. So, the message is clear. Everyone should remain calm. The police have issued instructions, and for now, the Hunters Association and the self-defense forces are working together to manage the situation and ensure everyone's safety. Meanwhile, in Takumi's car, he realizes that the driver is under Lucas's mental control. Frustrated by Takumi's observation, Lucas retorts, insisting that he isn't manipulating the driver for his own enjoyment. Takumi reassures him, acknowledging the gravity of their situation. He points out that they are likely being searched for frantically, but he believes they will remain undetected. After all, their enemies would never suspect that they were traveling in a police car. He adds that once they plant 3 more trees, their plan will be complete. Meanwhile, in the office of the Japanese Association leader, Fuwa learns that some trees have already been planted around Tokyo, while others remain. Ares reveals that, according to his mother's notes, contaminated trees appeared in the city during the Great Disaster, causing portals to open and allowing monsters to invade Tokyo. He warns that a similar catastrophe could occur again. This revelation takes everyone by surprise, including the protagonist, who suddenly grasps the seriousness of the situation. 15 years ago, similar routes emerged throughout the city. Back then, Haruto was just a child, riding in his father's car when they had to swerve to avoid a falling tree. As chaos unfolded, the protagonist's father could only wonder what was happening. But there was no time for questions. He had to focus on getting them to safety. However, the tree turned out to be swifter than they anticipated, striking their car during the escape. Haruto was puzzled by this sudden memory. Could it be connected to his curse? He questions whether the entity that destroyed the car back then was truly a monster or merely a corrupted tree. If it turns out that the same people are responsible for both events, he vows he will never forgive them. Fuwa replies that he does recall seeing trees like these before, but he was preoccupied with other matters and didn't give them much thought. Harris then mentions that his mother's journal states the barrier formed by the contaminated tree opens a portal to another dimension, akin to a subspace. However, Ku interjects, pointing out that if that were true, there would be no need to use contaminated trees from another dimension to establish the barrier. When he inquires whether this could be a portal to the Dark Spirit's subspace, Nana explains that accessing it requires dark mana infused with a black aura. A single contaminated tree, she notes, might not suffice. Harris responds that it's a long shot, but at this point, the subspace could potentially open. However, he warns that in the worst-case scenario, it might even lead to a doorway into a tainted dimension. The protagonist listens intently, realizing that the subspace is infinite. With this knowledge, he concludes that if harnessed properly, it could resolve his inventory issues. This newfound power would allow him to command an army of golems, ensuring he never runs out of dark mana. Determined, he sets out to locate and seize control of the subspace. As Du contemplates the situation, he scoffs, claiming he's never heard of a dimensional key that can open portals to other realms. Just then, the protagonist reveals the key, leaving Du utterly astonished. Harris steps in, explaining that this key is part of his mother's legacy. She discovered one fragment, while the other was unearthed by Haruto deep within the dungeon at the core of the giant golem. Du comes to a startling realization. This is all too real. She begins to question whether the two of them alone will be enough to face what lies ahead. Harris interjects, recalling her mother's words about the gate to the contaminated dimension opening in the United Kingdom. She suspects it's no coincidence that the contaminated trees and the dimensional fragments appeared at the same time. Someone must have brought those trees from another dimension. They might also possess the remaining dimensional pieces. Fuwa warns that, in the worst-case scenario, the dimensional portal could open, turning this into a global crisis, not just a problem for Japan. He suggests they seek international assistance from other associations. However, Ku counters that it's impossible, as one of the dimensional pieces is securely stored within his guild. An hour later, at the future guild headquarters, Ku guides them to the underground storage. Gu smirks, remarking that he always suspected Ku had a penchant for dungeons, but he never realized he also possessed a dimensional piece. Curiosity piqued, the protagonist asks Ku how he acquired it. Gu interjects, saying he doesn't even need to hear the answer. He already knows Ku has a knack for purchasing valuable items from the black market, even if many of them turn out to be fakes. However, the protagonist realizes that this isn't the case. His fragment is resonating, indicating that another one is nearby. Just then, Ku opens the storage room door, revealing what initially appeared to be a cluttered space filled with random items. Instead, it's a warehouse dedicated solely to storing fragments. Gu's excitement is palpable as he takes in the sight, but the protagonist firmly states that from this point forward, only he and Ku will proceed. Left outside, Gi seethes with anger directed at Haruto. Eris steps in, attempting to diffuse the tension. It's already risky to combine two fragments, she explains, her voice steady. We have no idea what might happen if we add a third. Ku nods in agreement, his expression firm. This is my guild, he asserts, and I'm the one who makes the decisions here. Go declares he's seen enough to know it's real and has no interest in what comes next. However, he warns that if a strange dimension opens, it will be their fault and he'll kill them both for it. He urges them to keep that in mind. Inside, the protagonist realizes that Ku's piece is number 4. Haruto attempts to inquire about its origin, but Ku cuts him off, insisting he stop asking unnecessary questions and focus on the procedure. He reassures Haruto that if things take a turn for the worse, he can rely on his barrier for protection. However, the protagonist remains unfazed, confident in his own abilities to safeguard himself. With determination, he strides toward the fragment, leaving the other 2 items tucked away in his inventory. Despite her concerns, the item reacts violently, triggering a massive explosion that lights up the area, visible even from a distance. Nanasi's heart races as she worries about what might have transpired within, having only witnessed the initial impact. Inside, a vast trail of destruction unfolds, leaving chaos in its wake. Ku is filled with outrage, grappling with the devastation around him and the belief that the protagonist is dead. Just when despair threatens to consume him, Haruto surprises him with a grin, admitting he really thought he was going to meet his end this time. Ku's gaze shifts to Haruto, a spark of realization dawning upon him. They both survived. The fragments are fused and Haruto has narrowly escaped death. As he takes in the immense power of the combined pieces, he reflects that next time, he'll need to tread more carefully. Ku observes that, unlike himself, Haruto hardly made an effort to defend himself, having escaped effortlessly with his shadow movement ability. Curiosity gnaws at him. Who exactly is Haruto? The protagonist notices Ku's intense gaze and urges him not to look at him that way. But then, in a surprising turn, Ku seizes Haruto by the neck and pins him to the ground. Haruto, taken aback, asks, "What's gotten into you all of a sudden?" Ku insists that shadow abilities require shadow mana, yet just moments ago, Haruto demonstrated the shadow movement ability. Demanding an explanation, Ku corners the protagonist, leaving him scrambling for a way out. With no escape in sight, the protagonist resorts to words, claiming he simply lacks the ability to use shadow mana. But Ku remains unconvinced. If what he believed were true, Haruto wouldn't have been able to slip through the shadows as he just did. Frustrated with the conversation, Ku launches an attack. The protagonist suffers severe injuries, and to make matters worse, he discovers he can't activate his shadow movement ability. Ku smirks, declaring that Haruto is now stripped of his tricks, having been struck by black-like magic, which renders anyone affected unable to use their shadow abilities. Haruto comes to a startling realization. Ku, like him, has his own tricks up his sleeve. Ku reveals that he has been suspicious of Haruto ever since their battle on the bridge against the dragon. Now he suspects that Haruto is in cahoots with Kurosaki Takumi and demands answers. Haruto feels a surge of offense. After all, he is doing the exact opposite. His goal is to stop Kurosaki Takumi, not assist him. Yet, he knows he must find a way to convince Ku of his true intentions. The mere thought of it ignites a fire within him, compounded by the frustration of being unable to unleash his full potential. He confronts Ku, questioning whether he's really going to kill him over something so trivial, insisting that he's not an enemy of his family. In a moment of desperation, Haruto ensnares Ku in the webs, but a sense of dread washes over him. He can't shake the feeling that he may have crossed a line with his words. In an instant, Ku struggles to break free, creating a chaotic uproar. A blinding flash of light overwhelms the protagonist. But as his vision clears, he sees Ku has freed himself from the webs and stands defiantly before him, ready for another confrontation. Ku declares, if it's something Haruto can't discuss, then perhaps it's marked as a star on the map. And if that's the case, I'll have no choice but to end you right here. The protagonist suddenly realizes that Ku is seething with rage and is intent on killing him. In his familiarity with such perilous situations, he momentarily forgets that Ku is a hunter above level 500, while he himself hasn't even reached level 300. With no other options left, Haruto understands that it's now or never. He doesn't have the luxury of time to contemplate his next move. In a decisive moment, he reaches into his inventory and pulls out a potion that restores 95% of the target's energy and heals their wounds. But just then, Ku launched another attack, unleashing a burst of black light. The protagonist barely had time to react and was struck directly. With no other options left, he reluctantly pulled the collision sword from his inventory. Though he had hoped to avoid using such a resource against an ally, Haruto found himself with no choice but to resort to it. Ku is struck hard, and as he defends himself, he senses the overwhelming force of the blow. His magic barrier shatters, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. In that moment, the sword's power strikes him again, and he collapses, unconscious, to the ground. In that moment, a vision of his past flooded his mind. He recalled the days spent with his brother, dreaming of building a guild together, one they named the Guild of the Future. But first, Sauta had his sights set on becoming the #1 hunter in the world rankings, determined to prove himself as the strongest of them all. 10 years later, they found themselves working side by side. Despite the formidable enemies and monsters they faced, the duo was more than capable of handling the challenges together. One day, Sauta voiced his unease about their group, sensing that an unidentified hunter was among them. However, his older brother reassured him, explaining that this dungeon was neither under the control of the Midas Guild nor the Great Sages Guild. It was a hidden dungeon, renowned for its mysteries. No one claimed ownership over it, which allowed the Guild of the Future to rise into the nation's top 10. He reassured Suda, urging him not to be afraid, for his return ability could rescue anyone, even from the depths of hell. He vowed to protect Suda from any danger that lay ahead. However, things took an unexpected turn when that mysterious member betrayed the group. He unleashed dark magic upon the boy and the others, declaring that the longer they were exposed to it, the more their minds would be tainted. Soon, they would devolve into low-level monsters, wretched beings, even worse than ghouls who would beg for the antidote, all because his younger brother was on the brink of death. The mysterious figure understood that by defeating the dungeon monsters, they had earned a reward, the ability to move through shadows. He offered to heal the boy in exchange for this newfound power, warning that without it, the boy would perish. With no other options, the boy agreed to the exchange and demanded the antidote. The masked man revealed that the only way to save him from mana poisoning was a legendary sword, passed down through generations, known as Brilliance. Ku realizes that helping his brother isn't as simple as he had hoped. He once imagined an antidote would be the answer, but obtaining it is far more challenging than he anticipated. The masked man grimly informs him that there is no antidote for dark magic. To make matters worse, the dungeon around them is on the brink of collapse, having already been cleared of its threats, and now serving no purpose. Even if an antidote did exist, it would be of little use if they couldn't escape with their lives. Ku suddenly understands that the enemy had orchestrated this from the very beginning. However, the masked man interrupts, insisting there's no time for further discussion. He needs to leave quickly if he wants to survive. Once the enemy departs, Ku turns to his brother, questioning whether he can use his return ability. Sada reveals an item he discovered in the boss room, a mysterious fragment, unlike anything he has ever encountered before. Ku quickly scolds his brother, insisting that now is not the time for nonsense, they need to escape. But his brother shakes his head, declaring he can't leave with him. In a moment of desperation, he uses his ability on Ku, sacrificing himself to ensure his brother's safety. Suddenly, a magical portal opens, whisking Ku away to another location. Alone and heartbroken, he breaks down in tears, overwhelmed by the weight of being the only one to escape. He did it. He brought the object his brother had given him, but it did little to quell his anger. Now, back in the present, Ku awakens and reflects on the past 10 years spent searching for that elusive dungeon, only to come up empty-handed. Deep down, he doubts his brother is still alive, yet his search has never wavered. Haruto comes to a chilling realization. Ku is determined to find him, even if it means only discovering his remains. It's no surprise that Ku is known as a dungeon otaku. The price of inciting Master Ku's fury is steep. With the berserk ability of the longsword, Haruto momentarily surged to level 600 in power, but his body simply can't handle it. Ku reveals that he has studied everything about Shadow Mana, and he knows that Shadow Movement is a rare and forbidden ability. Only the killer of his brother should wield that power. Sensing Ku's suspicion, the protagonist feels he has no choice but to reveal the truth. However, Ku cuts him off, stating there's no need for an explanation. After witnessing the protagonist use the sword against him, Ku has come to a conclusion. Both the shadow ability and the longsword's power were stolen by Haruto. Therefore, he realizes the protagonist is not the killer, and he sincerely apologizes for doubting him. Haruto accepts the apology, but he bristles at being called a thief. Ku nods, as everything clicks into place for him. He realizes that Haruto has also stolen the dragon Kushia's ability. With a thoughtful expression, he adds that he has 2 more points to discuss. Once the dimensional key is complete, they will join Haruto. However, Haruto warns him to keep his distance from Kurosaki Takumi. Haruto reluctantly agrees to let him handle it alone, as he insists that Takumi is his responsibility. Meanwhile, Takumi continues to wreak havoc, turning Tokyo into his own personal playground. After reaching an understanding, the two exit the warehouse. When Moore inquires about what transpired, Haruto casually replies that there was just a minor issue with the fragment combination. Nana informs the group that news has just arrived. A new contaminated tree has emerged in Tokyo. Enraged, Ku demands to know the whereabouts of Kurosaki Takumi. Era suggests they could anticipate his next move by analyzing the location of the last tree. However, before they proceed, she insists they must gather all the hunters around Ginza. Given the size and position of the barrier, it's clear that the subspace will open there. With that, Nana concludes that the number of monsters will be substantial, almost like a horde. Haruto realizes that if that happens, it will take considerable time to defeat them. No matter how strong he is, he can't rely solely on giant spider silk to handle the situation. Ku steps forward, determined to lead his guild in search of Kurosaki. He believes that as long as they locate him before the 4th tree is planted, everything will turn out fine. Meanwhile, Nana expresses her intention to return to the association's headquarters to regroup and asks the others if they would consider joining her team. The protagonist, however, states that he prefers to focus on preparing waking eats and work solo. Curious, Nana asks him why. Haruto explains that the subspace is vast and overwhelming, making the battle a numbers game. With that, Nana begins to grasp his perspective. Ku encourages Haruto to give it his all, eagerly anticipating the outcome. Haruto replies that he'll need Moore's assistance with something. Moore, hopeful, wonders if this means his talent will finally be acknowledged. Haruto, puzzled, retorts that Moore is merely hauling the luggage. Meanwhile, far away at the Starfield's headquarters in Europe, Mitsuel announces that a support request from Japan has just come in. It seems they've reached out to the US as well, declaring that the time has come. Michael interjects, mentioning he's heard the barrier isn't fully operational yet, and questions whether the subspace will open correctly. Mitsuel reassures him, confirming that the subspace is now heavily fortified and teeming with goblins and orc monsters. One of the attendees asks if she has any information about the Japanese hunters, asserting that only Takuchi and Nanananes would have an easy time handling these relatively weak creatures. He also mentions that if they're seeking support, no matter how large the crowd, they'll be swiftly overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Michael may face a tougher challenge. The elf explains that this is precisely why she went to the trouble of planting the contaminated trees to widen the subspace gate. The knight then raises a concern about the monsters, asserting that even without the Americans' assistance, the Japanese would easily conquer them. The elf warns that if she were in their position, she wouldn't place her bets on that. Michael asserts that the tree and seeds originate from the elf's land, emphasizing that this time they must succeed in their mission. Mitsuel reassures him, insisting that opening subspace in Tokyo is not new to her. Meanwhile, at the White House, President Raymond Romeo inquires about the reports of 3 contaminated trees from another dimension appearing in Japan. Logan Bowman, the CIA director, nods in agreement, drawing a parallel to the trees that emerged in England 15 years ago, which unveiled the mysteries of subspace. He notes that, although the gates have yet to open, there is currently no direct threat. However, an official request for support has come in from the Japanese Hunters Association. The president expresses concern that this looming danger could eventually reach the United States and inquires about the response from the International Hunters Association. Logan reveals that Michael Starfield is the director of the International Hunters Association, and rumors suggest they're heading straight to Japan. The assistant inquires if a hunter of Michael's stature might have personal reasons for the trip. Logan replies that national intelligence doesn't provide all the details, leaving them in the dark. Just then, the assistant's phone rings, cutting the conversation short. She informs the president that the leader of the American Hunters Association is calling via video. With a nod of approval, the president authorizes the connection. Simon DeFrey, the association's leader, appears on screen, his expression grave. "We have a serious problem," he states, urgency lacing his voice. The president assures Simon that he's already been briefed on the incident in Japan and has taken action. However, Simon interrupts, explaining that the situation is spiraling out of control. The Ouroboros Guild's aircraft has been reported heading straight for Japan. Alarmed, the president inquires if Turner is on that plane. Simon grimly confirms not only is Turner aboard, but he also possesses all of the Guild's equipment. Logan asserts that his power rivals the military strength of the United States. Sending a hunter like him abroad is akin to deploying a nuclear weapon. Moreover, Japan is a pacifist nation, and if this information were to leak, it would create a significant crisis. Simon insists that there's nothing they can do, as Turner is simply unstoppable. The president declares that the situation in Japan is officially resolved and requests immediate assistance in selecting the best hunters to send there. However, he emphasizes the need for absolute secrecy in their operations. Back in Tokyo, Lucas gazes at a tree, its form now a haunting reminder of his past. He glances down at his sword, once a symbol of protection for his family, now a tool for his own selfish ambitions. This turmoil began the day he received the curse and extraordinary ability that granted him a glimpse beyond the ordinary, allowing him to see the world through a transcendent lens. A torrent of media information, along with the resentments and desires of countless individuals, overwhelmed his mind. He could even perceive the consciousness and deaths of monsters. After a week of this relentless onslaught, Lucas was on the brink of unconsciousness, utterly paralyzed and unable to act. In a moment of desperation, he attempted to take his own life to escape the curse. Ironically, it was in that darkest moment that he discovered an unexpected will to live. In the hallway of his home, the family relics stood proudly displayed, among them the Angelus Foila sacred sword of immense power. The moment Lucas grasped its hilt, the tracking curse that had haunted him was lifted. With the ability to control the curse's power, he had escaped a living nightmare. From that day forward, he never parted with the sacred sword. However, everything changed when a portal to another dimension opened in the United Kingdom. The renowned hunter Nishihara sought to borrow the sword for his mission, but Lucas's father firmly refused, determined to protect his son at all costs. As a result, Britain faced significant losses, and the Cooper family lost all their status and influence. In his quest to master his powers, Lucas explored every possible method and discovered that absorbing dark mana helped him better control his curse. However, he knew that if he ever let his guard down, he would risk losing control. This is why the sword was always by his side. During this journey, he crossed paths with Michael, and while his family regained their power, the price they paid was steep. When Michael first uncovered his abilities, he had Lucas track down others with similar powers. Lucas would then eliminate them, absorbing their strength through the curse. To his family, he claimed he had no other choice, using that excuse for far too long. His fear of Michael turned him into a coward. Now, in the present, Lucas suspects that the user of copy ability might be Haruto, and he can't help but wonder what would happen if that power fell into Michael's hands. However, he yearns to witness it for himself, so he carefully stores the sacred sword in his inventory, triggering his infamous curse. In an instant, his perception broadens, allowing him to grasp the essence of things as if he were truly seeing them. Doubt fades away, and he is now certain that Haruto is, without a doubt, the wielder of the copy ability. Far away, on a plane bound for Japan, Turner Miller is determined to fight, openly defying his country's authorities. His companion, Richard, raises an eyebrow and asks, "If you want to go to Japan, why not take the warp route? And do you really need a private jet?" Turner responds with a question of his own, a smirk playing on his lips. "Have you forgotten the motto of our guild?" Richard insists he could never forget, reciting the motto, "The moment you let your guard down, danger will strike unexpectedly." He acknowledges his master's wisdom, promising to be more vigilant in the future. Meanwhile, Turner reflects on the calamity that occurred 15 years ago. Back then, he was just an ordinary hunter, teetering on the brink of death until Nishihara intervened and saved his life. Not long after, he received an extraordinary ability from a transcendent being, instantly elevating him to one of the strongest hunters in the world. Before the disaster concluded, Nishihara entrusted him with a crucial item. Now, 15 years later, the echoes of that dimensional peace are beginning to stir once more. Turner suspects that the events unfolding in Japan may be the very scenario Nishihara dreaded all those years ago. Back in Ginza, the subspace that Eris mentioned is on the verge of opening. Nana confidently asserts that they are in the right location, noting the significant concentration of people gathered here. Fuwa inquires about the responses from the other guilds. Nana replies that Master Shinoda from the Great Guild has agreed to assist. He is currently working to neutralize the contamination caused by the tree's pollution at the affected hospital. His guild members are diligently managing the contamination caused by the tree that emerged in the northern district, working tirelessly to contain its spread. Meanwhile, Master Takuchi from Midas is dispatching members to provide support across various areas. Hayak, however, prefers to remain alone in Ginza, ready to respond to any emergencies that may arise from the subspace. Fuwa inquires about the actions of the other local guilds. Nanas explains that they are protecting and guiding the citizens who couldn't escape. He then inquires about Haruto's absence. When told that Haruto is on a different mission, Fuwa's curiosity is piqued. Nanase admits she's curious as well, but she knows Haruto always has a trick up his sleeve. Just then, a junior named Akinaga Aoi overhears Nanase mention Haruto. As he helps with the loading, his supervisor suddenly calls him out, snapping, "Stop standing around and get back to work." Aoi returns to his tasks, pondering how it's hard to believe this is the same Haruto he once knew. After all, it's been ages since they last saw each other. Meanwhile, not far away in a shopping mall in the Ginza district, Satoru struggles under the weight of several backpacks, grumbling, "I'm already tired from this." Moore admits he's nearing his limit as well. Meanwhile, Haruto glances at his system, realizing he lacks the mana to wield the collision sword once more, and frustration washes over him. Satoru approaches, holding up a bag. "With this, we can store 100 items, and we've only used 13. How is that not enough?" he questions. Moore chimes in, asking if Haruto truly believes he can stop this with what he currently has. Haruto acknowledges that while the situation isn't ideal, it's the hand he's been dealt. He knows he needs the subspace, and regardless of the challenges ahead, he's determined to find a way to replicate it. Just then, they run into Lucas. Moore, surprised, asks what he's doing there. Lucas shoots back, telling Moore to be quiet. His focus is solely on Haruto. Moore questions why Haruto is drawing his sword if all he wants to do is talk. Meanwhile, Haruto recalls the tale of Master Kinosaki, who wielded a sacred sword capable of purifying shadow mana. This sparks an idea. Perhaps this is the perfect opportunity to replicate that ability. With newfound determination, Haruto charges forward, confident that his skills have improved significantly. He believes he no longer requires a specific condition to mimic Lucas's power. Before Haruto can react, Lucas reveals that he is already aware of Haruto's abilities. Confused, Haruto wonders how Lucas discovered this information. Despite his uncertainty, he feigns ignorance. However, Lucas is unfazed. He charges forward, declaring that there's no point in pretending. His family has risked everything for this moment, and he intends to seize it. With unwavering determination, Lucas lunges at the protagonist, but Haruto deftly slips into the shadows, evading the strike. Lucas immediately senses the shift and warns, "Be careful using shadow magic against me." As he unleashes his light-based magic, a brilliant glow illuminates the surroundings, momentarily blinding Haruto and obscuring his vision. Haruto feels a powerful light enveloping him, rendering him unable to navigate through the shadows. Satoru, visibly impressed, explains that this phenomenon is due to the sacred sword. It possesses the ability to purify a vast area and nullify any use of shadow magic. Lucas adds that the protagonist's diverse range of abilities stems from his capacity to copy them, including the elusive shadow magic itself. The protagonist struggles to conceal his vulnerability, fully aware that his inability to traverse shadows will complicate matters. He ruminates on how to navigate this predicament. Meanwhile, Lucas reveals that he is there precisely because the protagonist's unique ability to copy skills. He advises Haruto to focus on mastering his abilities without relying on imitation. Haruto remarks that Lucas's extensive knowledge suggests he too is cursed. He questions whether this is the reason Lucas allied himself with Takumi. Enraged, Lucas bristles at the comparison, declaring he is nothing like the trash that is Takumi. In a fit of anger, he lunges at Haruto, landing a direct hit with his sword. But as the dust settles, Lucas senses something unusual. Haruto had allowed the strike, seemingly attempting to replicate the sword's ability. However, his system warns him that using both abilities simultaneously would result in the permanent loss of his shadow movement. Taken aback, Haruto realizes he must tread carefully. He had assumed everything would be fine as long as he didn't activate both powers at once. After healing himself, he begins to strategize, searching for a way to break the stalemate. Lucas, curious about Haruto's next move, asks what he intends to do with his copy ability from this point forward. Haruto responds confidently, declaring his intention to harness his abilities to grow stronger and even surpass a transcendental being. His opponent scoffs, deeming that motivation too insignificant. Haruto reflects on his past, revealing that even before becoming a hunter, time was never on his side due to the curse he bears. He notices the confusion on Lucas's face and emphasizes the urgency of their situation. Only 5 years remain until the impending catastrophe strikes. Lucas feels overwhelmed, as if he's been bombarded with too much information to process. He can't shake the nagging thought that the hourglass is ticking down to the next impending disaster. Suddenly, the protagonist's system chimes in, announcing that the window to accept the copy has closed. If he wants to succeed, he'll have to try again. Resolute, he makes up his mind. He will go through with the exchange. All he needs to do is touch the target one more time. As he gazes up at Tokyo, a sense of urgency washes over him. Satoru and the others also sense that disaster is imminent. The rift to another dimension is beginning to open. Even Lucas understands the gravity of the situation. Once the subspace emerges, a contaminated zone will be established, severely limiting the powers of the hunters within it. In Shinagawa, just moments before the subspace opens, every hunter system blares a warning. Mana-based abilities will be restricted, and powers will be diminished. Takumi glances at the alerts, a grim realization settling in. Once the subspace opens, Tokyo will become hell on earth, he mutters, convinced the mission will reach its conclusion. But his words don't go unnoticed. A voice cuts through the tension, firm and resolute. "We won't let that happen." Takumi doesn't see the attack coming before it hits him squarely. Beside Era's, Ku appears, declaring his intent to defeat Takumi right then and there. Takumi, already anticipating Ku's arrival, smirks and asserts that it's too late. The barrier is complete, and Tokyo is on the brink of destruction. Undeterred, Ku replies that nothing else matters to him. He's solely focused on eliminating his target. He also mentions that the restriction hasn't impacted his dark mana. Takumi, however, insists that he's not alone in this and promises Ku that he will demonstrate the true power of dark mana. As they clash, hunters scattered throughout the city receive the alarming notification and begin to worry about the sudden decrease in their abilities, something they've never experienced before. Some even realize in real time just how much weaker they've become. Not only have abilities weakened, but potions and items have also lost their potency, creating a potentially fatal vulnerability for many. Even Nanas can't shake his concern. Fuwa, however, urges him to focus, insisting they don't have time to complain. Powerful monsters could emerge at any moment. Their fears are soon realized as portals begin to open throughout the city, unleashing a wave of chaos. But that's not all. From a specific portal, a figure emerges, startling Nanas. Even Fuwa, who attempts to mask his concern, can't hide his visible worry. In the distance, a mysterious silhouette catches everyone's attention. It's the elf Midzal. Some hunters murmur among themselves, questioning why an elf has appeared from a subspace portal. Just as Fuwa had predicted, colossal and fearsome monsters emerged from the portal, sending a wave of panic through the less experienced hunters. Midzal, with a smirk, remarked that it had been far too long since anything exciting happened. After 15 years of monotony, she was ready to unleash her wild side. As the monsters charged into battle, not far away, Hu stood ready, fully prepared for the chaos that was about to unfold. As the monsters closed in, he declared that their numbers and debuffs wouldn't deter him. He had no patience for underestimation. With a swift motion, he activated his stone armor, bracing for the imminent attack from one of the foes. But Gu was ready to showcase his strength, proving that even at a reduced capacity, he was more than a match for these creatures. He battles the horde with remarkable ease, his armor requiring no mana to activate. Despite the overwhelming number of monsters, Gu is resolute, confident that he can defeat them all. With each strike, he unleashes his full strength, leaving his enemies in awe. Even the hunters in his own guild watch in astonishment, impressed by his prowess. As their leader battles the larger monsters, the teen focuses on the smaller threats surrounding them. Meanwhile, Nanas engages in her own fight, deftly dispatching her foes with remarkable speed. But she isn't alone in this struggle. Master Fuwa stands firm against a towering ogre, activating his magic shield to confront the beast head-on. When the enemy strikes, Fuwa's shield absorbs the blow effortlessly. But it's not merely a tool for defense. He wields it as a weapon, too. With a powerful swing, he cleaves the giant ogre in two, taking down not just one foe, but several at once. Witnessing this, Nanas realizes that Fuwa's shield serves as both sword and shield, a dual-purpose weapon in the heat of battle. Even without relying on her abilities, she possesses remarkable strength. Determined, she decides to guide the President and Master Takuchi in confronting the larger monsters. However, the other hunters are struggling. Their combat effectiveness has plummeted due to the debilitating debuff. No matter how many monsters they defeat, the onslaught feels unending. She realizes that if this situation persists, even with support, they could soon find themselves in dire straits. Nanas skillfully dodges the enemy's attacks, but her heart sinks as she realizes this is no ordinary foe. Before her stands a griffin, a final boss-class monster. While a griffin may not be particularly strong on its own, its fire breath poses a grave threat. Nanas understands that it won't relent until its target is utterly incinerated. With their recovery abilities blocked, any hunter targeted by the creature would be taken out in a single strike. She realizes she must act quickly to stop it before it unleashes its devastating fire breath. Meanwhile, back with the protagonist and his team, shock washes over them as they process the alarming information about attribute reductions and debuffs. Moore speculates that this might be the work of a field dungeon boss. It's an extremely rare occurrence, yet he can't help but wonder why they are targeting mana abilities specifically. It's such a devious tactic, and he questions where Kurosaki could have possibly conjured such a twisted idea. The protagonist turns to Lucas, insisting that now isn't the time for distractions. Just as they prepare to act, dragons suddenly launch their attack. They begin to flee, and Moore warns that if the dragons start spreading, it will turn into a nightmare. Time is of the essence, and they can't afford to waste a single moment. As Lucas runs alongside the protagonist, Haruto insists they'll talk. Later, there's no time for distractions now. However, Lucas remains silent, causing a wave of unease to wash over Haruto. Just moments ago, Lucas had been chattering incessantly, and now his silence feels heavy with blame for everything that's gone wrong. Meanwhile, Lucas contemplates Haruto's lack of action with his copy ability, pondering whether he should inform Lord Michael about it. Lucas admits he has no clue what Haruto has in store, but he wonders what would happen if he used it right now. The protagonist replies that he would love to, but there is a specific order to these things. First, he wants to level up by tackling some simpler ground monsters. Meanwhile, Nanas feels she's lagging behind, and just then, the Griffon unleashes its fiery breath. Despite the intense heat, she remains determined, convinced she can endure the flames and emerge victorious. Yet the Griffon's fire burns hotter than she ever anticipated. As the realization sinks in, she hesitates, unsure of her next move. Just then, Fuwa rushes in, shielding her with his protective barrier. Nanas, taken aback, questions him. "Why did you leave your post?" But Fuwa insists there's no time for hesitation. He instructs her to behead the monster, while he manages the flames. Nanas nods, grasping the plan, and swiftly moves around the fire, charging toward the enemy. However, the Griffon catches sight of her and unleashes another torrent of fire. Nanas patiently waits for the perfect moment before leaping over the flames, aiming directly for the Griffon's head. She strikes with her spear, but the clever creature anticipates the attack and skillfully redirects the blow to a less critical area of its body. In retaliation, the Griffon swiftly lunges at Nanas with its razor-sharp claw. She defends herself as best as she can, fending off the enemy with her weapon. But now she's cornered, and the threat of fire looms closer. Just as the Griffon prepares to strike, it suddenly halts, sensing something amiss, and retreats into the sky. Fuwa rushes over, shield raised, and asks Nanas if she's all right. She nods, relief washing over her, and replies, "Yes, thank you." Fuwa admits he tried to help, but fears he may have made things worse. The enemy is now on high alert, and likely won't land anytime soon. If he throws his giant shield and the Griffon dodges, it could spell disaster. Realizing the Griffon intends to exploit its aerial advantage to unleash a fireball, he urgently tells Nanas to get behind him. Though she feels grateful, Nanas insists she has other plans and instructs Fuwa to throw his shield at the enemy. Following her command, Fuwa hurls the shield, allowing Nanas to close the distance. With determination, she approaches the Griffon and, in a swift motion, delivers a decisive blow, severing its head. With the plan successfully executed, she lands safely and the enemy lies defeated. However, Nanas quickly realizes that contaminated mana is seeping from the creature's body, spreading ominously into the air. To make matters worse, other monsters can soon follow suit. In essence, the more they defeat, the greater the danger becomes for the hunters. As the battle rages on, some members of the group find themselves up against a heavily armored foe, struggling to make any headway due to the enemy's formidable defenses. Just when hope seems lost, the group's mage reveals a card he had been saving for a moment like this. With a swift incantation and a powerful scroll, he unleashes a devastating spell that cleaves the enemy in two, armor and all. His teammates erupt in praise for his incredible feat, but the mage, catching his breath, reminds them that they now have nothing left in their arsenal. Their troubles escalate when one team member starts to feel unwell. After defeating the enemy, its body released contaminated mana, which quickly began to affect the entire team. By the time the mage realizes the gravity of the situation, it's already too late. To make matters worse, an elf approaches them with alarming news. All subspace monsters are tainted. As soon as these creatures perish, the air around them becomes polluted, endangering anyone nearby and plunging the defenders into even deeper peril. Ironically, she insists it's far too early to surrender. Many of the monsters have yet to emerge from the subspace portal, and regardless of the outcome, they are destined to perish. Meanwhile, Ikanaga Aoi, the junior protagonist who was part of the team and has been contaminated, has already resigned himself to the belief that this is the end for both the city and himself. Just then, a figure emerges, declaring that it's not over yet. Haruto arrives alongside his teammates, declaring that this is just the beginning of the battle. Aoi, taken aback by Haruto's sudden appearance, stands frozen in disbelief. "How did you get here?" he finally manages to ask. Haruto smiles, noting that it's been a while since they last met. But for now, he hands Aoi a potion, reassuring him that everything will be fine. Aoi, however, protests, insisting that Haruto can't stay. It's too dangerous. The protagonist reassures him, urging him not to worry. However, the boy can't shake the feeling that this might not be the Haruto he once knew. The group drops their backpacks to the ground, and the protagonist declares that before anything else, he needs to address this debuff. With determination, he sets to work, channeling mana to all his allies gathered around him. The mana not only heals them, but also restores their diminished attributes. Everyone is awestruck by the sheer power on display, until one of them suddenly recognizes Haruto, the renowned mana support in dungeons. Even Nanis and Fuwa, positioned far away, feel the effects of the mana surge. The master, noticing that the debuff has vanished, is left wondering just how this is possible. He is struck by the sheer volume of mana being distributed. Hunters from all sides feel the surge, quickly returning to unleash their skills in battle. Meanwhile, Mitzel senses the mana as well, noting how it even lifts the debuff that had previously plagued them all. She feels the weight of her oppression, and upon seeing the protagonist, she wonders if he might be the one she has been searching for all along. Although everyone's mana has been restored, countless enemies continue to swarm, wreaking havoc. Their sheer numbers and strength are overwhelming, making it difficult for even low-level hunters to stand their ground. One of the onlookers is taken aback as they witness the protagonist's team springing into action. Instead of retreating, they boldly charge straight into danger, facing a horde of monstrous creatures looming ahead. Satoru, eyes wide, remarks on how much larger the monsters appear up close. Haruto, unfazed, offers a reassuring smile and urges him, "Just empty the backpacks." They all follow suit, emptying their bags onto the ground. As they do, some of them glance around, puzzled by the presence of those spheres in such a perilous situation. However, the protagonist remains unfazed. He knows exactly what he's doing. Those spheres are golem cores. Unlike him, Nanis is in the dark about their significance. Lucas, too, shares her confusion, wondering what the protagonist has in mind. Haruto swiftly transforms the cores into small, powerful golems, just as he had done before. With this newfound ability, he assembles his own army of stone warriors. Meanwhile, Nanis comes to a startling realization. These spheres are indeed cores, similar to those they discovered in the dungeon, but far more elusive. Just as the weight of this revelation sinks in, the monsters regroup and launch their relentless assault. They even manage to destroy a few of the golems, leading some to believe the protagonist's plan is on the verge of collapse. However, to everyone's astonishment, the golems reveal their ability to regenerate. Not only that, but they also demonstrate a surprising combat intelligence, banding together to confront the monsters as a united front. This strategy gives them a distinct advantage over their enemies. Despite their small size, their numbers are overwhelming, allowing them to dominate the monsters and demonstrate their true potential to the hunters. Inspired by their bravery, some hunters eagerly join the fray. Satoru declares his intention to fight as well, and soon, more allies step forward, ready to stand beside him. Meanwhile, the protagonist remains solely focused on the levels he's gaining, as the golem's victories contribute directly to his own progress. He soon realizes that the range of what he can share has expanded significantly, allowing him to issue specific instructions. Even more impressively, his mastery over golem control has evolved to the point where he can now transform them at will. With that, the protagonist dismantles the smaller golems, merging their essence into a larger, more formidable creature. Now, Haruto has the perfect ally to confront the wyverns. He commands the golems to construct a stone dragon, which emerges with a fierce roar, proving itself a worthy opponent for his enemies. The hunters stand in stunned silence, having never witnessed anything like it before. On the other side, the enemies launch their fiery assault, but Haruto's golem dragon stands its ground. However, when struck by the enemy's flames, the golem loses its flight stability, leaving it vulnerable to attack. As the golem crashes to the ground, it shatters into countless pieces, leaving the allies momentarily shaken. Haruto had anticipated this outcome. He knew this battle wouldn't be easy. Determined to adapt, he shifts his strategy, using the scattered stones to create smaller, yet numerous dragon golems. The hunters quickly notice this change in tactics, but they also realize that Haruto's new creations are falling more swiftly than before. Once again, the enemy unleashes its flames upon them. Nanas reflects that despite their size change, the outcome remains unchanged. However, this time, the situation is different. The golems discover a way to circumvent the fire, spinning around it and creating a swirling vortex of flames. In doing so, they diminish the fire's intensity, turning the tide of battle. In this way, the enemy is stripped of its most formidable weapon, overwhelmed from all sides, and reduced to a shredded mass of flesh. The golems strike with the force of high-caliber bullets, bringing down every dragon in their path. With the battlefield cleared, victory is theirs. Only the golems remain in the sky, and in the wake of this triumph, the protagonist evolves once more, earning even more points than before. The hunters observe the remarkable effectiveness of the protagonist's efforts, noting that the airspace is now clear. However, on the ground, monsters continue to advance, and Nanase takes charge of the cleanup troops. With the sky secured, Haruto is eager to join the fight below, fully prepared for what he calls the hunt. Gu continues to battle the monsters alone, holding his own remarkably well. However, his focus shifts when one of the protagonist's golems approaches. Recognizing Haruto's handiwork, he initially finds it advantageous, but his surprise escalates when one of the golems suddenly leaps forward and grabs hold of him unexpectedly. Gu is bewildered by the unfolding events until Satoru approaches him, clarifying that the golems are clad in the same stone armor as Master Takuchi, which is why they perceive him as an ally. Gu raises an eyebrow, questioning if Satoru is using a golem as a shield. With a nod, Satoru confirms, explaining that it was a gift from Haruto. He adds that he's attempting to evolve it into armor, just as Master Gu does. However, Gu believes this situation is entirely different from his usual battles and resents being compared to what he considers weak creatures. To emphasize his point, he escalates his attacks, unleashing a more brutal fury upon the enemies. Satoru quickly realizes he has angered Gu, though he insists it was never his intention. Meanwhile, Lucas approaches the lifeless bodies of the fallen dragons. He understands that this victory was only possible because the protagonists had evolved their abilities and refined the golem control method, witnessing the true extent of their power. He concludes that this situation is beyond his comprehension, especially regarding the evolution of curses. A troubling thought crosses his mind. What would happen if Michael were to gain this power? Just then, someone calls out to him. The protagonist approaches and inquires about who opened the subspace from the other side. Lucas responds, acknowledging the risk he's taking with everything his family has at stake. He then asks Haruto if he truly believes he would betray them. Haruto can sense Lucas's reluctance. Ever since their confrontation began, Lucas has resisted every step of the way. It's clear that something is weighing heavily on his mind. Haruto probes, asking if opening the subspace truly only benefits the guilty. He also acknowledges that Lucas remains unaware of the full picture. Just as Lucas declares that the real chaos has yet to begin, the ground trembles beneath them. Roots from the contaminated tree burst forth, creating a barrier that separates him from Haruto. Trapped and vulnerable, Haruto realizes the danger he's in, while Lucas narrowly escapes. He understands that the elf is behind this, and if those tainted branches ensnare Haruto, the mana poisoning will escalate at an alarming rate, especially if Midzel is using her powers. Things aren't looking good. Lucas wonders if this will be the moment that pulls him out of the subspace, but he fears her abilities might clash with his sacred sword. He contemplates using brilliance to purify the area, but just as he prepares to act, he is abruptly halted. What's happening now, he asks, confusion creeping into his voice. Suddenly, roots lash out, gripping his arm and preventing him from wielding the sword. Despair washes over him as he realizes the gravity of his situation. Lucas struggles to break free, but the roots continue to entangle him, growing thicker and more relentless. A group of hunters stumbles upon the writhing tendrils, their eyes widening in alarm. Just then, Nanist appears, urgency etched on his face. "Never let your guard down," he warns, his voice firm. "We must keep moving." She suspects that whoever is pulling the strings must be close by. Her thoughts are confirmed when Nanist spots the elf, leaving her to ponder why an elf would be in this dimension. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Takumi, who is locked in battle with Ku. Takumi asserts that to wield dark mana, one must first conquer its addictive pull and confront the abyss that lies beyond, ultimately gaining mastery over its full power. He finds himself in a peculiar situation, almost understanding his opponent's words. But before he can fully process them, he is suddenly attacked. As he activates his magical protection barrier, he is shocked to discover that the opponent's sword has pierced through the shield, something that should be impossible. Caught off guard, he begins to wonder if there might be a way to survive the effects of dark mana. If there's a chance, then perhaps his brother has survived, and that thought lingers in his mind. Takumi admits he can't decipher Ku's thoughts, but insists that wielding such power isn't something just anyone can manage. Dark abilities come with a price. They draw in dark mana. As Arez approaches, he witnesses Takumi's formidable strength. Ku speculates that the enemy might have absorbed his dark lightning. Without giving the two any time to react, Takumi launches an attack. They narrowly dodge the strike, but the sheer force of the energy wave slams into a nearby building, nearly toppling it. Ku watches in alarm, his concern growing as the destruction unfolds. Takumi confidently declares that all his opponent's abilities have become useless against him as he prepares for a close-range attack. However, his advance is halted when Arez steps in to offer support. Ku then asks if she can cast the debuff, but Arez quickly denies her request. She suspects that Haruto is behind this, pondering the possibility that he might be supplying an endless stream of mana. She mentions that she's only using about half of her original power, yet it appears to be sufficient to slow the enemy down. Takumi catches wind of their discussion about infinite mana and deduces that it's the same guy from earlier. Drawing on his dark mana, he breaks free from Arez's trap. Arez quickly realizes she was right about his abilities. Despite her efforts, she attempts to restrain the enemy once more. Takumi, unfazed, retorts that no matter how many times she tries, the outcome will always be the same. With that, he lunges forward to attack, reminding her not to underestimate him. After all, he is the master of the Blood Tower Guild. Arez finds herself in an unexpected predicament. As she readies herself for the impending attack, she doubles her magical protection. Takumi observes her use of regular mana and smirks, declaring that if she's unaware of its limitations, he'll gladly enlighten her. He explains that dark mana has the ability to absorb regular mana, growing even more powerful in the process. With this knowledge, he successfully shatters Arez's magical barrier. Determined, she begins to contemplate her next move. Arez unfurls a magic scroll, conjuring a new barrier. Takumi, unable to resist, smirks and quips sarcastically about her choice, declaring that it's simply splendid. He confidently asserts that, just like before, he'll shatter this barrier with ease. Meanwhile, Arez's expression shifts to despair as she realizes that none of her force fields are holding up against him. Just as she was about to be attacked, a figure stepped in front of her, shielding her from harm. It was Arez, who seized the opportunity of being face-to-face with Takumi. With a swift incantation, he unleashed his magic in a counterattack. Takumi, caught off guard, was thrown back by the force of the blow. Seizing this moment of vulnerability, Arez quickly attempted to ensnare him once more in a magical trap. And with that, our story comes to an end. For now, if you enjoyed the recap, please leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next recap.